Chapter 1486. These two zombie cranes had charged in from the second floor's fence and flew to the first floor's pavilion. They found Ian, who was hiding in the stairwell, before launching an attack on her. At this time, Ian had lost all color in her face, and she was trembling all over. Meanwhile, Empress Zhao's expression had also turned very unsightly when she saw this woman. When she recalled how this woman had shut the iron gate tightly in front of her, selfishly not letting her in to hide, the fury in Empress Zhao's chest could not be soothed no matter what. Arbor drew an ice sword and aimed it at Commandery Princess Ian's chest. He asked with an icy expression, "You were caught." Ian immediately shook her head like a rattledrum. She looked at the young crown princess in horror and screeched repeatedly, "No, no, no. I'm not injured, I'm not. Look, look." Ian hastily exposed her arms. Sure enough, there was not a single wound on her snow-white arms. I have a defensive mystic weapon. I won't be injured," Ian said hastily. Empress Zhao swept her a glance with a sneer before turning to leave with Arbor with a harumph. Ian's complexion turned ghastly pale at once. When she recalled what she had done to the queen, she couldn't help but beat her chest in regret. Great. Now that the Queen Dowager did not like her. Even Her Majesty the Queen would not like her after today. Damn it. How could she maintain a foothold in the royal palace like this? Seeing Empress Zhao dragging her youngest daughter-in-law away without looking back, Ian was inwardly resentful. However, she had only taken a few steps down the steps with her head hung low. She suddenly paused when she felt a tingling itch near her navel. When she touched it with her hand, she actually felt several drops of blood. Ian was shocked and hurriedly lowered her head to look. With a pair of trembling snow-white hands, she slowly lifted up her torn clothes a little. Her pupils contracted. Sure enough, Ian saw that there was a small, shallow wound next to her navel, and there were even traces of blood seeping out. How was this possible? Ian's face instantly turned ghastly pale, and her legs swayed as if she was about to fall over. Could it be that when the two corpse cranes pounced on her just now, they were accidentally torn apart by their sharp claws? Ian's body swayed at once, and she looked like the sky was about to collapse. No, nothing will happen. Looking at her skin, it is still bleeding. Since it is bleeding, it means that there is no problem. If they were zombified, it was impossible for them to bleed. Yes, that must be it. Ian took a deep breath and kept consoling herself. When she looked up again, she saw that the little crown princess and Empress Zhao had gone far away. She didn't dare to delay any longer, and hurriedly chased after them. Afraid that the little crown princess would discover the wound near her navel, Ian hastily moved her belt up to cover the wound. Fortunately, that wound was relatively shallow, and it stopped moving after a few drops of blood seeped out. As a result, no one would be able to tell that there was a small wound on her stomach. At this time, the stoic-faced little crown princess suddenly turned around and gazed at her suspiciously. Ian was startled, and she reflexively tensed up her body. She looked at her with slight trepidation. "Grand Crown Princess, I think we had better leave this place as soon as possible." "What are you panicking for?" Arbor gazed at her coldly. She had already received the news. The well-trained hidden guards had split up into teams to clean up the corpse cranes. Meanwhile, Consort Cheng, Lu Fei, and the other royal concubines had only received a bit of shock, and they had already been brought to the main hall by the guards. Chapter 1487. After all, they had made ample preparations beforehand. As long as anyone dared to cause trouble in Yiting Court, regardless of whether they were corpse cranes or night caw birds, they would not be able to escape the fate of being exterminated. However, the other party had caused such a huge commotion, just to scare these weak imperial concubines? Arbor frowned slightly as she escorted Empress Zhao and the others to the main hall to meet up with Consort Cheng, Lu Fei, and the others. Xiaomi quickly walked over. Seeing that she was fine, she couldn't help but sigh in relief. "How is it outside?" "There are still many corpse cranes outside. The guards have already formed teams to clear them out. Everyone don't go out for now." Aoyi, who was following behind the little crown princess, answered very naturally. "Stay here." Arbor turned and walked out. Empress Zhao hastily grabbed her small hand. "Where are you going?" "Stay here for now. and wait for the commotion outside to calm down before going out. It's fine. Arbor calmly pulled Empress Zhao's hand away. I'll go out and take a look. I'll be right back. With that, her figure flashed and quickly disappeared out the door. Aoyi naturally followed closely behind. The Crown Prince had guessed correctly that the organization behind the scenes had made a move, but that such a small-scale attack was unexpected. Arbor had originally thought that they would send hundreds or thousands of zombies to attack. Presumably, it was unrealistic to mobilize a large number of zombies within northern Mo's fortifications. Therefore, these corpse cranes that could fly became their best choice. Unfortunately, there were too few of them to achieve the desired effect. Arbor pursed her lips and quickly walked to the entrance of Yiting Court to take a look. Aoyi, did the Crown Prince say when he will be coming? Many corpse cranes were scattered at the entrance of Yiting Court. They must have been in a fierce battle with the Hidden Night Pavilion. After a while, Aoyi did not speak. Arbor's head slightly exploded. She abruptly turned her head and came face to face with a stiff face covered in rotten flesh. That zombie had grown a pair of incomplete wings on its back. It opened its mouth and moved very quickly to attack her. It opened its mouth so wide that it was almost as wide as its face. It opened to an incomprehensible extent, as if the only thing left on its face was that mouth. Crack! One of Arbor's ice blades was crushed by the undead hag's huge fangs. It chewed and swallowed the ice blade. Heh! Arbor sneered and quickly stuck a teleportation talisman on himself. With a flash of light, he was already several hundred meters behind the corpse puppet. A wood spirit flew up and instantly condensed into a giant man-eating flower. It opened its mouth and bit at the corpse puppet. The giant man-eating flower swallowed the corpse puppet in one gulp, and its mouth, which was filled with sharp teeth, began to chew. All of a sudden, the man-eating flower formed by the wood spirits began to tremble. It opened its mouth as if it had been choked, and spat out the corpse puppet with red skin and green mucus. Roar! The undead hag seemed to be very sullen as it roared at Arbor. However, several dozen zombie cranes swooped towards Qiaomu, each of them attacking her without regard for their lives. It seemed that this gargantuan corpse puppet had already evolved to a 5th-grade corpse puppet. Arbor's understanding of zombies was broken. After all, in her previous life, she had only encountered 5th-grade corpse puppets at the time of her death. She did not know that the corpse puppets she had encountered in the lower star domain could only be considered low-level corpse puppets at best. Chapter 1488. The one in front of her was clearly on the verge of evolving into a mid-level zombie. This zombie had grown a pair of wings on its back. Although the wings were still very weak right now, they were basically useless. There was no guarantee that they would become extremely powerful in the future. In addition, this zombie was beginning to have the ability to command. In the past, the low-level zombies only knew how to attack without thinking. But now it was different. This zombie that was about to become a mid-level zombie could use its roars to command its subordinates to attack a single point. After Arbor used her vine to send a few corpse cranes flying, she leaped onto the giant ape's head. With a tap of her foot, she chased after the mid-level zombie that had retreated back into the flock of corpse cranes. Whoosh! 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 Arbor waved her hand, and countless ice crystals flew toward the zombie. At the same time, her slender figure had already arrived in front of the mid-level zombie. The startled swan dagger suddenly flew out of her conscious and directly attacked the zombie's head, flying over its head with a whoosh. The mid-level zombie tilted its head, dodging the startled swan dagger's attack. As if sensing the great danger of death, it suddenly roared like a madman, attracting even more corpse cranes. Suddenly, a shocking bolt of lightning and fire landed on the mid-level zombie with a boom. Without waiting for the zombie to struggle, it was roasted to cinders by the sudden bolt of lightning and fire. Arbor was slightly alarmed. She only felt that this person's attack was swift and fierce. His cultivation was probably on par with Mo Lian's, as she quickly turned her head and first glanced at Aoyi, who was lying on the ground, unable to get up. When she saw that he was fine, she couldn't help but relax. Then, she looked up at the man who had suddenly floated in front of her. Arbor opened her mouth slightly and her body inexplicably entered a state of alert in an instant. This was the first time she had met young Master Omega Katoka face to face since leaving the Qin estate. Her heart trembled, and her small face turned slightly pale. The second young master in front of her was wearing a light purple robe. His flowing black hair was slightly scattered by the wind. It's this face. It's this face. Xiao Mu was startled, and she suddenly reached out to touch the defensive boundary that had encircled her. This sudden feeling of restraint almost suffocated Arbor. He kicked the transparent barrier of the defensive barrier and said coldly, "Let go. Let's talk." A complicated look flashed across the second young master's eyes. He suddenly reached out and subdued her. Without saying a word, he grabbed her wrist and disappeared into the air with her in a flash. After a large group of guards appeared, they looked to the left and right with a puzzled expression on their faces. Many corpse crane corpses lay on the ground. Stay Up Late was lying on one side unconscious. As for the crown princess, she was nowhere to be seen. Where did he go? The guards anxiously shook Aoyi awake. Then, they started a carpet search around Yiting Court, looking for the crown princess everywhere. At this time, the young crown princess was no longer in Yiting Court. She had been brought by young Master Omega Katoku to an old residence on the outskirts of the Mo Kingdom capital. At this time, she was glaring at the man in front of her with icy eyes. "If you don't let go of me, I can guarantee that you will regret it later." The second young master sighed, his gaze firmly landing on her. "Jojo, I had a dream. A very, very long dream. In the dream, I saw you, and I saw myself. Bye-bye." Chapter 1489. In the main hall of Yiting Court, all the concubines and noble ladies waited anxiously. The main door was shut for a long time until a guard pushed it open and entered. "What's the situation outside? Where's the crown princess? Why hasn't the crown princess returned?" Xiaomi hurriedly stepped forward and asked, "Why aren't you saying anything?" "Princess, princess, your majesty the queen. The crown princess she..." Bang! A loud sound interrupted the guard's words. Sensing that the sound came from above, the group of powerless concubines and noble ladies involuntarily cried out in alarm and looked up. Kacha! A small piece of tile was stepped down from the roof. Everyone saw a sharp corpse crane's claw reach in through the crack, and couldn't help but huddle together in fright. "Aya, we can't be surrounded by a group of corpse cranes, right?" Fourth Princess Mo Shuang suddenly shrieked, startling her mother Lu Fei, who was sitting beside her. Seeing the queen and consort Cheng glaring angrily at her, Lu Fei hastily raised her hand to stop the noisy fourth princess. "Mo Shuang, shut up." "How can I shut up? Now that we're facing a great disaster, are you not even giving me the chance to speak the truth?" Mo Shuang jumped up from her stool and paced back and forth in front of everyone. "If this continues, we'll all be finished. Hurry and think of a way to charge out." Bailey Zhen withdrew the smile on her face and suddenly summoned a double-winged golden-striped leopard. She turned around and shouted at Qin Susu and Duan Siren, "Let's go, we'll kill our way out." "Everyone, wait a little longer. We've already notified His Highness Group. I believe they'll come to rescue us soon." Bang bang! The corpse crane's claw once again stepped down a few tiles on the roof. This time, the group of noble ladies looked up and saw half of the corpse crane's rotten face. "Ah!" Yang Fengyan jumped up in panic and grabbed Qin Susu beside her. "Susu, what do we do? Hurry and take me out of here. Hurry and take me away from here." "Miss Biao, you stay here." Qin Susu brushed away Yang Fengyan's hand with a serious face. She got up and looked at Bai Liz Hen, who was sitting on the back of the double-winged golden-striped leopard. She nodded and rushed out the door with Duan Siren and the others. Qin Susu and Duan Siren both summoned their mystical beasts, the green-eyed spirit wolf and the fire-furred rabbit. As soon as they stepped out of the door, they saw more than 10 corpse cranes pouncing in their direction. The three of them worked together and shot their profound energy in all directions. Very quickly, they eliminated those corpse cranes that pounced in front of them. When he looked up, he saw 4 to 5 corpse cranes circling around the roof of the main hall. There weren't many of them, but these long-necked cranes had sharper claws and could tear the roof tiles apart in a few moves. In a flash, the three of them flew up to the roof at the same time. They were about to get rid of the corpse cranes. Suddenly, a loud roar came from behind. Chin Susu, Duan Siren, and Bai Lishen immediately felt their hair stand on end as they turned around. The three of them instantly formed a triangle, allowing them to see the situation from three different directions. Following the loud roar was a corpse puppet with a pair of incomplete wings on its back. It was extremely ugly. As it moved, the rotten flesh on its body fell off piece by piece. Duan Siren almost vomited her dinner from last night. This corpse puppet gave people a very bad feeling. It was as if the three of them were working together, but it was still somewhat strenuous to deal with it. Chin Susu's eyes suddenly flashed. She instantly attacked, thrusting her long sword towards the corpse puppet's neck. Chapter 1490. However, the instant the sword landed, it deviated slightly and did not hit the zombie. Instead, it completely infuriated it. The rotting zombie bellowed angrily, and several dozen long-necked zombie cranes descended from the sky and attacked the trio while flapping their wings. After Duan Siren and Bai Lishen chopped off the heads of two zombie cranes, they looked up and saw Chin Susu being kicked off the roof by a zombie and rolling all the way down. Roar! The zombie gathered all the zombie cranes and attacked the duo. Just as the dozen or so zombies were about to pounce on them, several whooshing sounds pierced through the air. The arrows flying over instantly shot into the zombie crane's head. The zombie roared angrily at the sky, but before it could leap forward, a purple flame landed on its body like a streak of light, roasting it into a chunk of charcoal that scattered on the ground. Duan Yu and Situi flew to the roof in an instant and cleaned up the surrounding several dozen zombie cranes with a swing of their swords. Duan Siren gasped for breath and looked up at Duan Yu. She involuntarily called out with a wide grin, "Fourth brother." However, Duan Yu coldly swept her a glance and did not say anything. After exchanging a look with Situi, the two of them flew down and landed on the steps in front of the main hall. When Empress Zhao and the others heard the sounds of rescue, they quickly opened the door and walked out one after another. The crown prince was dressed in a long black robe and had his hair bound by a jade crown, his back straight. With his back facing Empress Zhao and the others, he whispered to someone before waving his hand to have Yu Xiu lead a group of dragon saliva guards to investigate the situation. On the other side, the Royal Guard commander Hui Feng and his younger brother Hui Fan also led a group of people over and were cleaning up the remaining zombie cranes along the way. When Empress Zhao saw that her son had arrived, her eyes couldn't help but heat up, and she quickly walked down the steps. Emolian saw her mother running over when she turned around, so she went up to support her mother. "Royal mother, you must have been frightened." Empress Zhao quickly shook her head. "It's nothing. Quickly bring more people to look for our daughter-in-law. Our daughter-in-law asked us to stay in the main hall. She ran out alone and hasn't returned yet." Emolian was stunned. She turned around and frowned at Stay Up Late, who was running toward her. "What's going on?" "Your Highness, the Crown Prince Consort and this subordinate have arrived at the entrance of Yiting Court. Originally, this subordinate wanted to wait there to meet up with Your Highness, who knew that we would encounter an evolved corpse puppet with wings. During the fight, this subordinate was suddenly hit by an unknown mystic energy and fainted on the spot." Stay Up Late knelt down and blamed himself. "I'm useless. I couldn't protect the Crown Princess. Please punish me, Your Highness." Emolian wasn't in the mood to punish him. She turned around and headed straight for the entrance of Yiting Court. His little crown princess had disappeared at the entrance of Yiting Court. That could only mean one thing. Someone had kidnapped his crown princess during the chaos. He suddenly felt a little apprehensive. Could it be that this farce in Yiting Court was actually aimed at kidnapping her? "Follow him," Liang Qingqing hurriedly called out. A group of sect disciples with excellent combat strength followed the crown prince to the entrance of Yiting Court. However, when the crown prince and the others arrived at the place that Stay Up Late had pointed out where the little crown princess had disappeared, they saw a middle-aged man wearing a metal ghost mask leading a group of more than 3,000 men in black. They suddenly jumped in from outside the wall and attacked the group without a word. Chapter 1491. After exchanging a look with Duan Yu, the crown prince abruptly turned and dashed toward the back of Yiting Court's garden. His speed was so fast that it was like a streak of light streaking across the horizon. The man in the Iron Demon mask was taken aback. Then, he waved his hand and led more than 3,000 subordinates in pursuit of the crown prince's group. Hall Master, beware of trickery. The masked Raksha princess couldn't resist giving a reminder. Northern Prince Mo only brought 1,000 dragon saliva guards and 2,000 royal guardsmen on this trip. The man in the Iron Demon mask snorted. How could those good-for-nothings be our match? Chase. As soon as he said the word chase, the group of black-clothed men who were rapidly dashing after him all increased their speed, gliding past like cold stars. Under the dusk of the night, the crown prince, Duan Yu, Situ Yi, and a group of about 100 sect disciples were seen dashing to the back of the garden. The crown prince suddenly stopped. Duan Yu and the others also naturally stopped and turned to look at the group of black-clothed men who were rapidly chasing after them and surrounding them. Mo Lian's gaze swept up and down the black-clothed, iron-masked man's body before abruptly chuckling. You coward! Why don't you tear off your veil and let everyone see your true appearance? The man in the Iron Demon mask cracked a smile, and his voice was a bit rough. Does your highness the crown prince want to die knowing the truth? Unfortunately, you won't have this chance. Mo Lian chuckled. Haven't I told you before that overly proud people will die very quickly? With a wave of his hand, figures surged out from the surrounding trees and flowers. Under the leadership of Yu Xiao and Hui Feng, over 1,000 dragon saliva guards and imperial army guards swiftly surrounded these black-clothed men, forming 3 layers inside and 3 layers outside. As a result, the man in the Iron Demon mask and his group became sandwiched between enemies from both inside and outside. However, he smiled mockingly at Mo Lian. You think these little guardsmen from the lower star domain can take us down? TSK. Duan Yu couldn't resist shaking his head. I don't know if you were born arrogant or stupid. Can't you tell even now? This is a trap set up for you. You're dead for sure today. What's the point of talking nonsense with an idiot? Do it. Liang Qingqing shouted and suddenly pulled out a silk net as thin as a cicada's wing. At the same time, a transparent net also appeared in the hands of the 2 sect's disciples, including Duan Yu, Situ Yi, Bailey Shi, and Wei Nanfeng. The 100 people worked together and leaped into the air. They tore apart the net in their hands. An inescapable net covered the sky and covered the earth as it flew towards the black-clothed men. Mo Lian also leapt into the air, shooting out hundreds and thousands of purple flames from her fingers. Once this flame fell on the inescapable net, it immediately emitted a purple smoke, which formed a fire net in an instant. The black-clothed men who were caught in it were so frightened that they jumped up and resisted. Right now they were like turtles caught in a jar. There was a net of fire above their heads, and if they retreated, they would be annihilated by the well-trained guards led by Yu Xiao and Hui Feng. If they advanced, they would be even more miserable. If they encountered the 2 sect's disciples, they would either be roasted to death or shaken to death by the mystic energy. Mo Lian swiftly threw down a dozen purple lotuses, which abruptly exploded in the midst of the black-clothed crowd, causing the crowd of black-clothed people to suffer greatly. Chapter 1492. Strangely enough, no matter how the purple flames wildly scuttled and wantonly swept through the crowd, the inescapable net above them would not be destroyed. After a period of panic, the man in the Iron Demon mask hastily shouted, "Don't push and shove each other. Gather your strength and tear apart the fire net above us first." It could be said that his action was very wise, but unfortunately, that web-like thing was actually very flexible. No matter how much firepower they gathered to blast open a corner, it was to no avail. The man in the Iron Demon mask couldn't help but feel terrified when he saw his black-clothed subordinates collapse one by one. There were already over 500 casualties. With a roar, everyone carried the fire net over their heads and quickly moved in the direction of the clear stream. However, his movement disrupted the formation instead, allowing Yu Xiao, Hui Feng, and the other royal guards to quickly pounce on him and swiftly kill over 200 people. The Raksha princess blended into the crowd and didn't even dare to breathe loudly. She only felt that if this continued, their group would probably be wiped out by the Crown Prince and the others. I'll leave it to you guys. Lian was anxious to find his wifey. So how could he have the time to continue bickering with the man in the Iron Demon mask? Hence, he handed over command to Duan Yu and the others while he led a small group and swiftly left. When the man in the Iron Demon mask saw this, his lungs were about to explode from anger. Northern Prince Emo was completely disregarding his group. What did this mean? It meant that this lofty crown prince didn't treat them as opponents at all. Kill! The man in the Iron Demon mask roared angrily and waved his hand to instruct his subordinates to protect him as they continued retreating toward the clear stream. There was a bamboo forest at the other end of the clear stream, so he expected that the fire net above them would be affected by the bamboo forest's obstacles after entering. However, he was truly too naive. 5 minutes later, when he discovered that his group was still trapped in the bamboo forest, he couldn't help but panic. He had already lost over 1,000 subordinates along the way, and there were less than 2,000 black-clothed subordinates left. If this were to continue, wouldn't they be tortured in this Yuting court sooner or later? Duan Yu involuntarily snorted as he looked at the flustered demon-masked leader. What? Do you think my all-encompassing net is a joke? Like I said, all of you will die here today. Summon your mystic beasts to defend. With the ghost-masked man's command, all the mystic cultivators above level 10 in the group started to summon their mystic beasts. However, great mystic cultivators were still rare in the end. Among the 2,000 people, only 200 or so people could summon their mystic beasts, and a portion of them were support-type mystic beasts that didn't have much combat ability. It was a bloody battle, almost a one-sided slaughter. This made the eyes of the man with the iron ghost mask bloodshot. He suddenly took out a shining white bead from his pocket. Not good. Level 15 profound energy bead. Situi shouted loudly, reaching out his hand to block the crowd that was charging upwards. Everyone retreat. Die. The man in the iron mask viciously glared and abruptly injected all the mystic energy in his hand into that bead. After a huge boom, countless people were sent flying by the mystic energy bead's power and crashed to the ground with a thud. Chapter 1493. Waving away the thick smoke in front of him, Duan Yu gazed coldly at the giant sinkhole that had appeared in the center. Countless men in black had died in that sinkhole, and the ghost masked man had already disappeared without a trace. In order to escape, he completely disregarded the lives of his subordinates? Duan Yu's lips curled as he sneered inwardly. He sighed and said, "Did he think he could escape?" Cough cough. Yu Shou covered his face with his sleeves and waved away the thick smoke in front of him. He ordered sternly, "They can't have escaped far. 30 people in a team and eliminate all the enemies that have escaped to every corner of Yuting Court." Everyone responded in unison and formed well-trained teams. Duan Yu looked up at the overcast sky and said to Situi, "Let's go. We don't need too many people. Let's go meet that half-dead ghost-masked man." Liang Qingqing quickly followed. "I also want to go and see what kind of person is pretending to be a ghost over there. He even dares to tame something as disgusting as a zombie, ha?" In the outskirts of the Mo Kingdom capital, inside a pitch-black old residence, the sky had completely darkened, and lightning flashed across the night sky. It looked like a heavy rainstorm was about to descend. Arbor didn't know how long she had been cooped up in this small room. She was so irritated that she kept kicking the defensive barrier in front of her. That damn Omega Kotoku. Why hadn't he died from mystic energy exhaustion after trapping her in this defensive barrier for such a long time? Creak. There was a light sound. The door was pushed open. Staring at the young sir who walked in, Arbor's eyes could practically shoot out flames. "What are you doing?" Sir Omega Kotoku leaned to the side and had the servants bring in dinner, placing it on the short table in front of Arbor. After the door to the side room closed, there were only the two of them in the room, and the air instantly stilled. "I said just now that I only want to have a good talk with you." On the other side, Lian, who had led her men out of Yuting Court and was carefully searching along the lake, suddenly paused in her steps. She took out a green vine from her inner world and gripped it tightly. There was actually no reaction? Why? Logically speaking, as long as he didn't leave the vicinity of the Mo Kingdom capital, he only needed to hold on to Chocho's vine to connect with it and be brought into Jojo's paradise planet. This situation could only mean one thing. Jojo was currently under someone's control, and his spiritual awareness was most likely sealed. Even Jojo himself could not communicate with the sapling. When she thought of this, Emolian became even more anxious. Just as she was about to turn around and ask Duan Yu for help, she saw Duan Yu, Situ Yi, Liang Qingqing, Wei Nanfeng, and Bailey Shi swiftly leaping towards her. Jojo is really gone, Emolian said with a frown. Let's find that ghost masked man first. I think Jojo's disappearance should be related to him, Duan Yu said coldly. Situi frowned and suggested another idea. Could it be? Someone took advantage of the ghost masked man's attack to rob little junior sister, while the ghost masked man was leading his men? Emolian, you said that this organization that created zombies wanted to cause a great disaster in the Mo Kingdom capital. But why didn't they go to the downtown area to cause trouble instead of coming to such a desolate Lake Heart Island's Yiting court? Wei Nanfeng shook his head and said, Say, they couldn't have come for the little miss, right? Let's go. The more Emolian listened, the more apprehensive she felt. She didn't want to delay any longer. Taking out their communication jade tablet, the group identified their target and chased after Gale Forest after exiting the lake. Chapter 1494. The ghost masked man didn't know that his whereabouts had already been exposed. With the Raksha princess's support, he stumbled all the way to Gale Forest. At this time, the people lying in ambush in Gale Forest all revealed themselves and took out the clothes they prepared beforehand for the ghost masked man to change into. The Raksha princess's eyes flickered, and she cupped her hands in salute. We will go our separate ways. You guys enter the city, and I will return to the Raksha ghost sect first. After saying that, she swiftly left. A woman wearing a white veil involuntarily gnashed her teeth in resentment. This woman is extremely slippery when she encounters trouble. Forget it, let's enter the city first. The ghost masked man changed into scholarly attire with a scholarly headscarf wrapped around his head. His ordinary face didn't have much expression. Just as the group exited the forest, they heard gusts of wind whistling through the air. The scholarly man's expression changed, and he hastily yelled, Go! Unfortunately, he hadn't even dashed out a few steps when Emolian, Duan Yu, and the others rushed over and blocked his path. Your Excellency Siming Manor's High Priest, haha, so you really are an old friend. Duan Yu scoffed. He flicked the jade heavenly thunder in his hand, and suddenly aimed it at the other party. He said with a smile, It's best if you don't move. Were you the ones who captured the crown princess? Emolian asked coldly. Confess honestly, and we will give you a quick death. Everyone, is there a misunderstanding? A faint smile appeared on the high priest's scholarly face. The crown prince's consort? Our Siming Manor is heading to the Mo Kingdom capital on this trip, so we haven't seen the crown princess. Stop pretending, all right? We followed you all the way here. Take out your ghost mask. Liang Qingqing folded her arms and smiled mockingly at the high priest. The high priest's frail face slowly turned gloomy. His face suddenly twitched, and he laughed sinisterly. I really underestimated you bunch of juniors. Wei Nanfeng moved his fists and legs, and smiled at the high priest. So it's one of the famous 4 great villas, Ximing Villa's high priest. Now can you tell us what organization you're working for? Tell me about it. Let's chat. The high priest snorted and involuntarily took 2 steps back. Do you think you can catch me? As soon as she finished speaking, Emolian's finger moved, and a flame spirit whip shot towards the high priest. At the same time, Arbor stared expressionlessly at the Omega Kotoku through the transparent barrier. Are you born to be so cold? No, I remember that when I carried you out of that secret room, you looked at me with a very grateful gaze. At that time, you were not as cold and emotionless as you are now. Omega Kotoku propped up his chin with one hand and looked at the girl in front of him in a daze. He seemed to have a lot to say to her. That strange dream, let's call it a previous life for the time being, that continuous and strangely sorrowful dream made Omega Kotoku, who had walked through the course of his previous life, Feel very uncomfortable. Jojo, tell me, was that dream real? You stayed by my side for a full 4 years. It was fake. Arbor glanced at him coldly and mocked. Second young master. You aren't so stupid that you can't distinguish between dream and reality, right? Chapter 1495. No, I don't believe it. The experience in the dream was so real. How could it be fake? Qin Xian suddenly stretched out his hand and grabbed Arbor's wrist, asking with an agitated expression. Jojo, tell me all of this is real. It's real. You're crazy. Arbor threw his hand away and coldly glared at him. It's all fake. What 4 years, what dream? I don't know anything about it. You're lying to me. Your eyes tell me that you're lying to me. You know. Qin Xian coldly stared at Xiao Mu's eyes, wanting to dig out some peculiar emotion from her emotionless and apathetic eyes. However, there was nothing at all. At the entrance of the Qin estate, when I first saw you, I had a very familiar feeling. And you, I remember, your reaction at that time completely showed that you knew me, right? Huh. Arbor sneered and turned his head to glance at him indifferently. He said in a very sarcastic tone. I took a few more glances at you because at that time, at the entrance of the Qin estate, a bunch of sick women were looking at you. I was just curious, don't think too much about other things. Liar. Qin Xian forced these 2 words out from between his teeth. He suddenly stretched out his hand and firmly grabbed her weak shoulder, shaking it hard. You're lying to me. You clearly remember me. Isn't it? Isn't it? You're crazy. Arbor kicked him hard. Only separated by the defensive barrier. This kick landed on the barrier. Hateful damned man. His hands could pass through the defensive barrier and grab her at any time. And any attack she kicked over was blocked by the defensive barrier. Hateful to the extreme. Let go. This nightmarish man could actually remember everything from her previous life? Was he joking with her? How could it be? She was reborn, but this man wasn't. How could he remember those painful memories from her previous life? How could he? Scram! Arbor ruthlessly kicked the defensive barrier again, his eyes spitting out flames of anger. Why was this person so annoying? What right did he have to act like they were close friends, and not let go of her shoulder? Disgusting. Arbor used all his strength to push away the Omega Katoka's hands. He tried to kick it, but it was bounced back by the defensive enchantment. She took a few steps back and sat down on the stool. Do you hate me that much? The second young master stared at her coldly, and a self-mocking smile appeared on his lips. But do you know how much I like you? When Arbor heard the word like, it was as if he had been stung by a poisonous snake. His whole body trembled, and he subconsciously shrank back. She raised her head and stared at the second young master warily. Her eyes were filled with wariness and disdain. Get lost. Never say the word like to me. Don't fall in love with me, or else you won't be able to bear the consequences. Xiaomu coldly glanced at him, as if hearing the word like from this person's mouth was inconceivable and unbelievable. Why? Why can't I say like? In my dream, you clearly looked at me with a like expression. Bullshit. Is it really good to think so highly of yourself? See you tomorrow. Chapter 1496. That was because in the beginning, it was him. It was this elegant and calm man who had pulled her out of hell. She was grateful for that. Back then, it was as if she was grabbing onto a fleeting light, holding on to him tightly, wanting to rely on this person. She thought that he was a good person. However, in the end, it was just a joke that brought disgrace upon herself. Arbor's eyes were cold and filled with coldness. When he looked at the person in front of him, there was no warmth at all. Such a gaze seemed to provoke this person, causing him to suddenly laugh. No. Really no? Arbor's pupils shrank, as if he was going to say something scary. She hurriedly interrupted him. Shut up. Why don't you let me continue? What are you afraid of? Ah. Arbor threw him a mocking look. I just don't want to listen to your nonsense. Jojo, in the dream, you clearly had feelings for me, Sir Omega Katoka said with certainty. Arbor looked at him sarcastically. You think too highly of yourself. In the dream? What dream? Everything in the dream, how can it be real? Arbor was too lazy to argue with him. This was no longer her previous life. She could only say that this person was too annoying if he insisted on harping on the past. Moreover, was there anyone who knew her feelings better than her? She had never liked him in her previous life. Rather than saying that she liked him, it was better to say that she had once seen him as her savior. Back then, she had been so desperate, and this person had suddenly descended upon her like a god, saving her from hell. However, the other party had only treated her as a little pet. If he liked her, he would touch her head. If he didn't like her, he would heartlessly starve her for 3 days and 3 nights. In order to tame this disobedient little pet of his, he could leave her there to fend for herself for many days. To let her be like a little worm, using her head to wander in the dark, so dirty and lowly that she almost couldn't believe it. That was her past. Such a cold-blooded and heartless man, just because of that so-called dream in her previous life, suddenly opened his mouth and said that he liked her? Haha, don't you think you've blasphemed the word like? Liking someone meant treating them as a pet. Liking someone meant that they wanted to be their master. Liking someone meant that they could bully them, tame them, and make them obedient? This kind of liking, whoever wants it can take it. Arbor couldn't afford it. In her previous life, when this cold man starved her for a few days and nights and realized that he could not tame her, she did not know if something went wrong, or if he suddenly had a conscience. But he suddenly changed his attitude towards her. What was the use of that? At that time, she had already been completely defeated by the loss of her dignity. At that time, she had already lost her heart. She had personally let go of the man she had once seen as her savior. She no longer had any feelings for him. Even if he treated her like a baby in the future, no matter how well he treated her, it would be useless. She didn't even want to hear, see, or ask anything about him. Even if she heard or saw anything, she would choose to forget about it. When they met in this life, she couldn't even remember his surname. In Arbor's eyes, this second young master in front of him was probably a little crazy. I didn't want you for a long time. Arbor's cold words were like a sharp arrow, ruthlessly piercing into the second young master's heart. Chapter 1497. She had abandoned him a long time ago, that the Omega Kotoka's pupils constricted as he stared at the young lady in front of him, with a strange gaze. He did not know why, but at this moment, he really wanted to reach out and grab her. No, he wanted to hug her. He wanted to hug this emotionless young lady tightly. Let go. He just wanted to be willful, and not let go of her for once. Bam! Seeing him reach out to grab her, Arbor kicked him away with all his might and dodged to the side. If he did not like her, then he did not like her. Why bother? Besides, it was useless to bother her. She should have thrown away these unhappy memories of the past, shouldn't she? Not a single one of these unimportant people would be able to touch his heartstrings. She could not be pulled into the abyss by this person in front of her again. She could not be confined to the nightmares of the past. She had to break free. She had to break free and be reborn in her state of mind. Otherwise, it would not be beneficial to her future path of cultivation. That's the right way to think. Kill him. Kill this person in front of you, and you will be able to destroy your inner demon once and for all. The right path is right in front of you. A cold voice suddenly appeared in her conscious. It was chilly like ice and snow pouring down from a high mountain. Under the falling peach blossoms, a tall red figure suddenly appeared beside her. It was so sudden that the Omega Kotoku could not help but be shocked. He looked at the venerable peach blossom immortal, who had suddenly appeared. Bam! However, in the next second, something even more shocking happened. The defensive boundary that was originally encircling Xiaomu's body was actually shattered by the red-clothed man who had suddenly appeared with a powerful strike. A force of backlash swept over him, catching the Omega Kotoku off guard. He spat out a mouthful of blood. You are not from this star region. Qin Xian's eyes became extremely cold in an instant. She looked coldly at the man who had suddenly appeared to disturb her. Jojo, don't hesitate and be soft-hearted. Take this opportunity to kill your inner demon. The venerable peach blossom immortal raised his 5 fingers. Several thorns formed by the wood spirit suddenly shot out and flew over in a zigzag manner. Qin Xian was not surprised to see this. After all, It was not strange for an unknown expert, who was not from Seacombe Planet, to know how to use the power of the wood spirit. He quickly struck out a palm, and a thunder fire landed on the thorns. He had thought that this thunder fire would be able to block the thorns no matter what. But he was wrong. That this red-clothed man who had appeared out of nowhere had a cultivation that was much higher than his own at this moment. The thorns directly passed of the thunder fire and wrapped around his 4 limbs and bound him tightly. With a tug, second young Master Qin was actually pulled into the air by the brambles, and he stared at that smiling red-clothed man with an extremely frosty gaze. Do you know what price you have to pay? This man had used the Supreme Saint power in the lower star region. Although it was only a little, it was enough to incur the wrath of the heavenly Tao. The venerable Peach Blossom Immortal shrugged with a playful expression. He turned to look at the little girl, who was clenching her fists tightly and not moving. Jojo, kill him quickly. What are you still hesitating for? The venerable Peach Blossom Immortal came to her side in a flash. With a wave of his finger, more and more thorns wound around Qin Xian's body, like twisting poisonous snakes. Now is the time to deal with your inner demons. Chapter 1498. Xiaomu reflexively bit her small lips, her small face as white as snow. After hearing the venerable Peach Blossom Immortal's words again, Arbor pulled open a transparent and shiny bow made of ice crystals. That big bow made of ice crystals spun in her fair little hand. In her other hand, a snow-white arrowhead gradually formed. She knocked it on the big bow and aimed it straight at the Omega Kotoku's heart. You really want to kill me? The Omega Kotoku closed his eyes in pain. That's right. I owed you in my previous life. If you want me to pay you back in this life, I have no complaints. Xiao Qiao, in this world, only you can make me die willingly. Since you want me to die, then I will die. What am I afraid of? I am so fearless. Death will only bring me closer to you. Arbor's hand that was holding the bow trembled slightly. Suddenly, she heard the venerable Peach Blossom Immortal's indifferent voice. Jojo, don't hesitate. If you don't get rid of your inner demon, how will you grow in the future? Do it quickly. Show the greatest courage of your life. Yes, she wanted to kill him. She could not let him come into her life again. She could not let him become her inner demon. She could not let him have the chance to get close to her. Whether it was Qin Xian or Fan Qiuhe, the nightmares of her previous life would be cut off by her own hands. Farewell forever. The nightmare of my life, don't ever think of bothering me. You have no value in existing anymore. Arbor's eyes were replaced by a cold and resolute look. With a clang, the arrowhead pierced through the air and shot straight toward Qin Xian's heart. At that moment, her cold eyes fell on his smiling face. She stared at him with an incomparably cold gaze. She could not describe the feelings in her heart. Carefree? Yes. Release her anger? That seemed to be the case. Perhaps it was more of a release. It was an indescribable joy to be released from the nightmare of her previous life. She, Arbor, would never be disturbed by this nightmare again. It was time to walk out of it. Qiao Qiao. Qin Xian called out in a low voice. The last thing she saw was his scattered black hair, and that slightly miserable handsome face. Xiaomu's eyes abruptly widened. Boom! He looked at the Omega Kotoku in front of him. Like a cluster of broken stars, he suddenly shattered into pieces in front of him. Arbor couldn't help but frown. There seemed to be something wrong with this fragmented scene. How could a perfectly fine person disintegrate into pieces like a broken soul? Before she could think further, a large, warm palm gently stroked her head. Good girl, you did well. In the future, when you are faced with even greater despair and difficulties, you can think about it. You are a person who can personally cut off your own inner demons. You, fearless. Arbor turned his head to look at him. Suddenly, his expression changed slightly as he reached out and grabbed his sleeve. What's wrong with you? I'm leaving. The venerable Peach Blossom Immortal looked regretfully at the invisible chains on his limbs. He couldn't shake them off and couldn't help but roll his eyes at the sky. All right, I'll go by myself. You don't have to use so many heavenly Tao chains to keep me hanging, okay? Where are you going? Arbor grabbed his sleeve tightly in panic. Hey, I'm going to a fun place. Don't worry. When you want to summon me again, I will appear. Chapter 1499. It's just that. The venerable Peach Blossom Immortal tilted his head in embarrassment and smiled. If I don't respond for a long time, it means that I haven't come out of that place. Where did you go? Arbor tugged at his sleeves, her eyes wide open. Is it dangerous? Is it like what Qin Xian said? That you used a special ability to be targeted by the heavenly axiom? You're hiding in our paradise planet. That's right. If I hide in Paradise Planet, will the heavenly axiom still be able to find me? After the venerable Peach Blossom Immortal said this, the dozens of heavenly axiom locks on his body suddenly increased to 50 to 60. They dragged him out of the courtyard. Damn, heavenly axiom, do you have to be so cruel? It's not like I don't want to go. Let me drink some good wine. How many years has it been since I last ate meat and drank wine? What joy was there in cultivating in that vast expanse of whiteness every day? I might as well not. Damn. Suddenly, the heavenly axiom locks on his back, hands, and legs increased to a few hundred. He dragged the venerable Peach Blossom Immortal out of the door. Hence, Xiaomu hugged his arm tightly. She felt like her body had been stabbed by countless blades, and it was so painful that she wanted to die. The venerable Peach Blossom Immortal's expression changed slightly. He tried to pull his arm out of her hands. Little girl, let go. Little girl, do you think you can stop the heavenly axiom? Let go. I won't. How could she watch a person who had helped her multiple times be dragged to some unknown place by the heavenly axiom? Silly girl, what can happen to me? The venerable Peach Blossom Immortal, who was being pulled back by the heavenly axiom locks, looked down at her helplessly. I'm really fine. Isn't it just a trip to the punishment realm? I used to go there often too. Big liar. What punishment realm? It didn't sound like a good place. The venerable Peach Blossom Immortal, who had successfully become a big liar, stretched out his hands helplessly. However, his hands were bound by the heavenly axiom locks, and he couldn't move at all. He couldn't even pat her head to comfort her. With a slightly regretful gaze, the venerable Peach Blossom Immortal said, I'm not a big liar. My name is Huichin. Remember it. Also, the cultivation level of your inner demon's main body is actually about the same as mine. You have to be careful when you go to the upper 3 continents. Peach Blossom. The little fellow pounced with all its might and caught hold of a section of his sleeve. The corner of the venerable Peach Blossom Immortal's mouth twitched helplessly. I already said that you're not called Peach Blossom. You're called Hichun. This child is really thoughtless. Why is he so worrisome? In the next second, an open black door suddenly appeared behind the celestial venerable. The passage was so deep that one couldn't see the end of it. Arbor only glanced at it for a moment, before he felt the world spinning around him. He was sent flying by a huge force. Heavenly Tao, why did you throw her? I'm not done with you. The venerable Peach Blossom Immortal shouted angrily. The moment the black door slammed shut, he and his voice disappeared without a trace. Rotten Peach Blossom. Arbor was about to lunge forward when he suddenly hit a thick wall. She looked up and saw that the great ape had suddenly appeared in front of her. Her head hit the great ape's fat belly. Her head hurt so much that tears welled up in her eyes. Chapter 1500. Rotten Peach Blossom was dragged to some unknown place. What should she do? She panicked for no reason. When she suddenly heard the words punishment realm, she felt an inexplicable sense of familiarity. It was as if she had heard someone mention it before. Xiao Xiao, who was trying hard to play dead, did not make a sound for a long time. Xiao, Master. The little Treant Dodo hopped out from Paradise Planet and climbed up her left shoulder in a flash. The 2 little tree branches matched each other, and it lowered one of its branches and said, Master, you tell me what you want to tell me. Xiao will definitely tell you everything I know. That punishment realm that Rotten Peach Blossom talked about. Is it really not dangerous? That's heavenly Tao, in order to punish, What are you, about? Tell me quickly. He sounded like he was trying to think of a way to trick her into going over while talking. What kind of situation was it? And it still wanted to hide it from her. It was simply preposterous. The little Treant raised its little head pitifully, and did not dare to continue hiding from its little master, who was about to go berserk. It hurriedly said, It's like this, Master. That's because powerhouses above the deity realm are all very powerful. And even Heavenly Tao cannot kill them wantonly. Therefore, Heavenly Tao specially set up a 17-story tower of punishment. Cough. It's just to suck in disobedient powerhouses above the deity realm, like the Venerable Peach Blossom Immortal, and train them. Actually, it's not that dangerous. It's just a little troublesome. Arbor turned and glared at the little tree. Before this, the Venerable Immortal had always stayed in our paradise planet, and Heavenly Tao could not do anything to him. Therefore, when the Venerable Immortal used his holy power this time, the Heavenly Tao could not tolerate it anymore. That's why he was dragged to the punishment realm. Little Master, you can just imagine that punishment realm as you don't even need to imagine it. It's just a 17-story tower. As long as the Venerable Immortal passes this 17-story tower, he can come out. What if he can't pass it? Arbor stared at Chocho with a pair of round eyes and asked. If he can't pass it, he'll be locked up for 180 years. The little tree muttered to itself. What? Arbor's eyes widened. Don't be nervous, little master. Don't worry. This was definitely not the first time he had entered the celestial realm. Look at him just now. Indifferent, right? That cool and unrestrained, right? You clearly don't look scared at all. Little tree continued. Just think of the Tower of Punishments as a place for cultivation. Actually, it's pretty good. It can help people improve their cultivation quickly, right? What about Emolien? Your Highness, you don't have to worry at all. After going in, they would definitely be able to come out. At most, we'll spend 100 years in there. How can the Heavenly Tao not let us go? The sapling Chocho blurted out before realizing what it had just said. She immediately widened her beady eyes and looked at her young master's almond-shaped eyes. She hurriedly used the branch to slap her own mouth. 100 years? Darling Qiao's voice trembled, and her eyes turned red. She looked like she was about to cry. Chocho, who was tricked into telling the truth by her young master, immediately slapped her own mouth again and grumbled. Nonsense, nonsense. Master, don't worry. Nothing will happen to His Highness the Crown Prince. Chapter 1501. At the same time, Divine Province's Qin estate, inside a beehive-like cultivation room against a mountain, a handsome youth drenched in sweat abruptly opened his eyes and spat out a mouthful of blood. Exiner, who destroyed your clone? A calm voice that contained a hint of anger suddenly rang out in his small cultivation room. I don't know. Preposterous. Wait until Father sends someone to Seekong Planet to investigate. No, don't go. Cough cough. Father, there are currently many powerful enemies entrenched on Seekong Planet. We'd better not send anyone there and make unnecessary sacrifices. What you say makes some sense. After all, even your clone that has already materialized is no match for the powerful enemies on Seekong Planet. It can be seen that sending someone else there will be of no help. However, this matter cannot be settled so easily. Whoever destroyed your clone will naturally leave behind some aura. As long as they set foot on the Divine Province's soil, Father will be able to sense it and avenge you. Qin Exan shook his head with a wry smile. After sensing a wisp of his father's divine sense withdraw from his cultivation room, he once again coughed out 2 mouthfuls of blood. He clenched his fists tightly. You want to kill me so badly. He smiled rather bitterly, his lips curling into a faint curve. You might not know yet, but we will meet again. Outside Gale Forest, Simon Manor's high priest and eldest heavenly daughter were subdued by a net of fire. They struggled with all their might, glaring fiercely at Emolien. Prince Emo, you probably don't know. As long as this old man dies, all of the corpse puppet armies lying in ambush outside the Emo Kingdom capital will launch an all-out attack on Guanlan City. You simply won't be able to avoid it. Where did you take my crown princess to? Emolien stared coldly at the high priest. Ha ha ha. The eldest heavenly daughter suddenly looked up at the sky and cackled. Which one has the leisure to look at your crown princess? Prince Emo, your question is rather interesting. Pa. After slapping herself across the air, the eldest heavenly lady glared ferociously at Emolien, who had attacked her. The entire northern Emo will be drowned by our corpse puppet army. This is your destiny. Anyone who goes against us will not have a good ending. This was called, those who obey the heavens prosper, and those who defy the heavens perish. Anyone who does not conform to the will of the heavens will be devoured by the will of the heavens. Heavenly fortune. Everyone was extremely sensitive, and they all caught these two words that were different from usual. This heavenly girl had emphasized the word, heavenly luck several times. Oh, so that underground organization of yours is called Tianyin. Wei Nanfeng couldn't hide the shock in his heart, but on the surface he had a carefree smile. Crossing his hands, he asked with a sloppy look, "Aren't you guys used to digging holes underground and living like rats?" "Don't worry, when we received Prince Mo's letter a few days ago, we started searching the entire kingdom for your rat's nest." "That's right. There will be a day when we can wipe out your rat's nest in one fell swoop." Liang Qingqing sneered, pointing her sword straight at the high priest. "Your Excellency, High Priest, why aren't you confessing honestly?" "Oh no, this person took poison." Duan Yu flashed over and grabbed the high priest's jaw, forcing him to open his mouth. In the blink of an eye, the high priest's eyes abruptly turned bloodshot. End of midnight. Chapter 1502. Mo Lian was slightly alarmed, and a streak of fire shot over. "Quickly move aside." In the blink of an eye, this streak of fire struck the high priest's gaping mouth. The high priest failed to bite down on Duan Yu's arm, and staggered back 2 steps after being hit by the streak of fire. Duan Yu seized the opportunity to ruthlessly kick the high priest in the stomach, sending him flying far away, before crashing to the ground with a bang. Disgusting thing. Liang Qingqing's mystic energy surged, transforming into a palm-sized giant hand that suddenly landed on the high priest's head. Exclamation point. A muffled sound rang out. The high priest howled in pain from the beating, and his small blood-red eyes flickered with a ruthless glint. "Don't waste words with him. This thing mutated." Situ Yi, Wei Nanfeng, and the others quickly attacked, bombarding the high priest's head with mystic energy, as if it was free. In a flash, this person's head was blasted to the ground, completely lifeless. Seeing the high priest being surrounded and beaten to death by a group of youngsters without any explanation, eldest heavenly lady, who had been maintaining her graceful posture under the white cloth, suddenly panicked. Eldest heavenly lady hastily ordered the Siming Manor's disciples to block her and protect her. Meanwhile, she shrunk behind the crowd, looking like she wanted to find a chance to escape. However, how could Mo Lian's group be willing to let her leave like this? Bailey Shi and Wei Nanfeng pincer attacked from the front and back. Their long swords imbued with mystic energy released 2 streaks of light, respectively stabbing the legs of the fleeing eldest heavenly lady. Eldest heavenly lady shrieked as she toppled to the ground with a plop. When she turned around, she saw that Liang Qingqing and the others had already dealt with most of the Siming Manor's minions. This terrifying martial strength that eldest heavenly lady's pupils contracted, and she instantly felt that a calamity was looming over her head. The group closed in on eldest heavenly lady and trapped her in a small encirclement, making her inwardly resentful but unable to escape. Don't act recklessly. What the sacrificial heavenly master had said before was all true. If I'm also killed by you, then those zombies will definitely sweep through the Mo Kingdom capital and launch an attack. None of you can think of escaping." Before she could finish her words, Mo Lian's raven moon pierced through her shoulder. "You talk too much." Prince Mo coldly glanced at the woman and pulled out his sword from her shoulder. "This is not what I want to hear." Eldest heavenly fairy immediately became listless. What do you want to hear, Your Highness the Crown Prince? We really didn't kidnap the Crown Princess." Situ-Yi was silent for a few seconds before suddenly saying, "Previously, Siming Manor's high priest announced that they were searching for phoenix eggs in the Mystic Beast Forest. Was it to attract everyone to the Mystic Beast Forest? You did it on purpose. Am I right? Didn't you guess it already? Why do you still have to ask?" the great heavenly maiden said while trembling. "Why?" Situ-Yi was determined to get to the bottom of this, as he coldly stared at eldest heavenly maiden. "Speak." The high priest wanted to lure the 8 great patrician families and use sect disciples to the Mystic Beast Forest. His original intention was to release a group of zombie rats to infect you and then control you one by one. BB cultivators' bodies are different from normal people's, especially mystic cultivators. His Excellency the High Priest wanted to know if mystic cultivators could also undergo a certain degree of mutation after using medicine. Chapter 1503. What exactly do you want to do, Heavenly Fate? The essence of your research on this mutated poison is to accelerate the evolution of normal people. Emolien snorted. Isn't that so? In the beginning, this mutated poison only caused new corpses to mutate. Then, you weren't satisfied with mutating a bunch of corpses. Instead, you directly experimented on living people. Emolien coldly looked at Big Heavenly Maiden and said, Your research on the poison was very successful. You successfully wiped out a batch of weak normal people. You allowed some people to gain strength, while the others turned into ugly zombies. The most tragic ones were those normal people who didn't change at all. Because such people have no value in existing, and will become food in the stomachs of zombies. Isn't that the case, Simon Manor's Big Heavenly Maiden? Duan Yu added as he turned to ask with a grin. Since you already know everything, then what else do you want to ask? Big Heavenly Maiden suddenly shouted agitatedly, a dark light flashing through her eyes. I was originally just a normal person, but the mutated poison you speak of allowed me to gain a powerful speed ability. Big Heavenly Maiden's chest was abruptly pierced by a mystic energy, and she fell heavily to the ground. What a pity. A speed ability user like you still can't withstand a mystic cultivator's attack. Duan Yu smiled as he lowered his raised hand and glanced at her without a trace of sympathy. Do you want to create a fair world, where there are no normal people, and only special ability users, mystic cultivators and body cultivators? But do you know? In reality, this world is inherently unfair. Some people's talents are beyond your reach and beyond your reach, Duan Yu said with a sneer. Big Heavenly Maiden's body involuntarily stiffened as she trembled at their threatening and scorching gazes. She suddenly screamed with all her might. Long live the Heavenly Fate! Long live the Heavenly Fate! The fire of Heavenly Fate will not perish. Where there is Heavenly Fate, there will be hope. Heavenly Fate! Heavenly Fate! Heavenly Fate! Emolien's sword flew up and instantly sent her head flying. She then turned around and said to everyone, Duan Yu, take them back and deploy them according to the original plan. Prepare for battle. I'll go check on Jojo first. You received news from her? Yes. Emolien nodded. Qiuqiu had informed him of Jojo's location just now, so he had to hurry over and meet up with Jojo as soon as possible. Alright. Duan Yu nodded and didn't say anything else. He ordered people to clean up the high priest's and eldest heavenly lady's corpses, before immediately returning to the city. Emolien naturally followed Qiuqiu's directions, and hurried to an old residence in the suburbs. Within the capital, he could indeed ask Sapling to bring him into Paradise Planet. However, no matter where he went in, he would still come out from the same place. It was impossible for him to teleport to Jojo's side in an instant. Hence, he still summoned Little Seven to give him a ride so that he could speed up. The little Trent's tone was clearly a bit dejected. He didn't know what happened to Jojo, that he didn't even use the messenger talisman to inform him that he was safe. When Emolien rushed to the old residence, he saw the little fellow at the entrance as soon as he landed. This little thing was currently curled up into a ball and hugging her knees as she sat on a stone block at the entrance. Chapter 1504. She drooped her little head, looking especially dejected. Prince Mo's heart shrank slightly. He hurriedly walked forward and scooped the little thing up from the stone block, hugging her in his arms. What's wrong? When the little fellow raised her head, he could clearly see that the little thing's eyes were moist. It was obvious that she was about to cry. Prince Mo immediately panicked. He hurriedly hugged her and asked softly, Jojo, what's wrong? Who bullied our Jojo? Tell me quickly. I'll beat him up for you. You guys. Arbor tightly pursed her little mouth, trying her best to hold back the moist tears in her eyes. Don't cry, don't cry. Only weaklings cry so easily. She was someone who strived to become strong, Someone who wanted to embark on the path of becoming strong. How could she be defeated by a little setback? Us. Emolian stealthily swept a glance at the little treant, who was hiding behind the stone block. The cold light in her eyes hit the little treant in the face. It was so cold that the little treant shook its little body and sneakily hid in the crevices of the stone blocks. It hated that it couldn't hide its entire body. Woo-woo. It was his fault for being nosy and saying the wrong thing. Arbor suddenly stretched out a pair of small arms and firmly wrapped them around Emolien's neck. She rubbed her head against his neck and cried out pitifully, "I'll go with you, go with you." "Where are we going?" Emolien really couldn't understand what the little fellow was shouting about. "Let's go to the Tower of Punishment together." When the 4 words Tower of Punishment were said, Emolien's cold eyes seemed to be covered with a layer of cold fog. She suddenly looked at the little treant, who was hiding in the crevices of the stone blocks. Other than him, who else would mention the Tower of Punishment in front of the little fellow? "I'll go with you to that 17-story bullshit tower. Let's go and bring the rotten peach blossom back." Arbor moved around his neck, and a small head moved back and forth on the side of his head. Emolien's heart was almost melted by her adorable actions. He reached out and picked her up by the waist, and simply carried her to sit on the stone block. "You can't go, Jojo." "Why?" Arbor's eyes widened, and then he drooped his small head and said softly, "I know, I'm too weak." "No. How can my Jojo be too weak?" Emolien hugged her and shook her little body. He lifted her head and said, "Jojo, Jojo, Jojo. You're still young, you can't go to that place. Give me half a year. No. 5 months. I promise you. I will definitely come to Shuntian Prefecture to look for you, okay?" Arbor shook her small head like a rattledrum, and her hands firmly grasped his lapels. This person, this hateful man. In the past, when he stuck by her side all day long, she didn't feel anything. But now, when she knew that he was going to leave her, her heart was inexplicably flustered. "Big liar." Arbor looked at him pitifully and shouted, "Chochio said that you will be imprisoned in the Tower of Punishment for 100 years before you can come out. Just like rotten peach blossoms. Rotten peach blossoms can't come out. You can't come out either. You can't come out." "Chochio." Emolien shouted angrily. Chochio immediately stretched out 2 branches to cover his non-existent ears. Whoa. Chochio was wrong. Chochio's mouth was cheap. Chochio didn't dare to speak nonsense anymore. Chapter 1505. How could that be? Don't listen to Chochio's nonsense. He's just a deceitful tree. What would he know? He's just a guy who doesn't know how to watch his mouth. Emolien hurriedly hugged his little wife and comforted her. "I swear within 5 months, I'll definitely come to Shuntian Prefecture to see you. Jojo, my Jojo, how could I bear to leave you behind?" However, this small separation was for a longer reunion in the future. He had already thought it through. Wasn't it just going to challenge the Tower of Punishment? He had nothing to fear. In addition, his seal was about to be opened in a few days. When that time came, his divine realm aura would leak out, and he wouldn't be able to hide it from the heavenly Tao. Rather than being dragged away by the heavenly Tao like a rotten peach blossom, he might as well go himself. He'd just make a trip to the realm of punishment. What could the heavenly Tao do to him? As long as he made it through, the heavenly Tao wouldn't be able to find trouble with him in the future. What if I can't make it through? Arbor hooked her 2 little claws around his neck and looked at him with an uncertain expression. "How can you not make it through? Don't you know who your husband is?" Emolien reached out and pinched her little nose playfully. "Isn't it just a 17-story tower? Can't I make it through in 5 months? Besides, don't I have a rotten peach blossom to help me?" Arbor thought that was true. In any case, Emolien went there, and he had a rotten peach blossom to help him. But how could the little fellow know that Prince Emo was just coaxing her? Because in the 17-story Tower of Punishment, everyone who entered the tower would be separated, and no one would be able to meet each other, without anyone to help. If you made it through, the heavenly Tao would let you scram. If you didn't make it through, you would be locked up for 80 to 100 years. This was no different from going to jail. Who told you to break the rules? Who told you to be crazy? You're a divine realm expert. and you just had to sneak into a lower realm to make your presence known. Don't you know that great gods like you can destroy a star region with a flick of your finger? How could the heavenly Tao allow such an existence to stay in a lower star region? Don't joke around. Will the phoenix egg and little white snake be dragged away too? No, the phoenix egg has a contract with you, so it conforms to the laws of the heavenly Tao. As for little white snake, let's not let him show himself. Arbor wrinkled his little nose. I was thinking of forming an army of summoned beasts. Such a thing can never be achieved, right? The heavenly Tao was so lenient that he had to take care of everything that happened. How could he watch her form an army of summoned beasts and run amok in the world? That might not be the case. Emolian saw that she was in a bad mood and could only coax her carefully. Jojo, be good. Maybe the heavenly axiom is in a good mood and won't care how many summons you have. Liar. Arbor looked unhappy. After summoning the little white snake, I reached my summoning limit again. Now I can't summon anything. Chirp. Emolian couldn't help but plant a kiss on her soft little face. Don't worry. You'll definitely be able to summon more in a while. You'll really come and see me in 5 months. The little fellow raised her little head and looked at him seriously. You're not lying to me? I'm not lying. Liar. Rotten peach blossoms are also lying to me. How could that be? Emolian rubbed his face against hers. Rotten peach blossoms are rotten peach blossoms. I am me. Of course I won't lie to you. Are you sure? The little fellow asked again, unsure. Chapter 1506. Emolian lifted her small chin and solemnly nibbled on her lips. He chuckled softly and said, I really won't lie. Jojo, we've known each other for so many years, but have you ever seen me lie to you? Of course I won't lie to you. His cheek gently rubbed against the side of her face. Jojo, even if I lie to everyone in the world, I won't lie to you. Arbor's heart settled a little. She understood Emolian quite well. As long as it was something he promised, he would most likely perfectly resolve it within the time limit. So that if he said 5 months, it would probably be less than 5 months. The 100-year prison sentence the sapling Chocho mentioned was most likely to scare her. Where was Little Tree? Little Tree. She was going to kill him later. Okay, I believe you. Arbor nodded and said, 5 months, at the latest 5 months. You must come and find me. You're not allowed to be late, or else I'll ignore you. Okay. Emolian hugged this willful little fellow and nodded in agreement. Wait. Since when do we start counting? Emolian was taken aback. Then he said exasperatedly, I haven't left yet. Of course, it starts counting from the day we parted. Arbor puffed up her small cheeks and peeked at him with her large, watery eyes. It's not today. Emolian. That he was originally feeling a little sad. But why did he suddenly feel like laughing? His little stoic baby was seriously so comical. Emolian hugged her lovingly the entire way and said softly, Let's return to the Eastern Palace. I still have something to tell you. On the way, Emolian told Arbor in detail about the High Priest at Siming Manor. No wonder the High Priest was willing to announce such an important piece of news like the phoenix egg to the public. So it was because of this idea. Arbor shook his head. It seems that those people from Heavenly Fate are no longer satisfied with the status quo. They want to extend their evil claws to mystic cultivators and body cultivators. Their experiments need to be improved. It's just a pity that there are too few mystic cultivators and body cultivators available in their organization. So they've set their sights on the 8 great patrician families and some sections. Emolian also nodded in full agreement to this. I also think so. Unfortunately, they underestimated your abilities. The entire underground base of the Mystic Beast Forest was swept clean by you in one fell swoop. Emolian curled his lips as he joyfully nuzzled Xiao Mu's petite body. Xiao, do you worship hubby a lot? Arbor nodded and praised. You are really the smartest person I've ever met. As he said this, he pursed his lips as if he thought of something. It's just a pity that High Priest and the Great Holy Lady are already dead. So we can't obtain any useful information. Emolian gave a MHM, before saying with a chuckle, That's not necessarily the case. Duan, you will definitely search their souls. Although they're already dead, and the soul searching might not be effective, it's still better than nothing. The two returned to the Eastern Palace and wanted to rest for a bit. But who would have expected that the zombie army outside would be so impatient? Before it was deep into the night, the noisy group of zombies had already started attacking the Mo Kingdom capital. There was a small discrepancy between this time and the time Mo Lien calculated. It was early by more than 2 hours. However, it didn't matter much since their group had already made preparations. Chapter 1507. Speaking of which, it was strange that the zombies attacking the Mo Kingdom capital this time were like a well-trained army, advancing layer by layer towards the city walls like an ocean wave. At first, they only advanced on a small scale, but when they neared the northern city walls, a large number of zombies swiftly advanced towards the city walls, accompanied by waves of roars. It was as if there was some core in the zombie army, directing them on how to attack and fight. However, for Mo Lien and the others, who had experienced Bailon City's crisis, they had already developed a set of very effective countermeasures to deal with the zombies attacking the city. Arbor stood on the city gate tower, as he watched the soldiers push the large catapults up the city gate tower. He only glanced at them briefly. This catapult had been modified, and there was even a groove for storing kerosene at the end. When the fire started burning, the soldiers on the side worked together to lift up a huge rock and throw it into the catapult. Arbor only saw that huge rock instantly caught in the raging fire and rolled all the way through the groove. It abruptly flew several dozen meters into the air and was sent flying out of the city walls with a bang, crashing into the zombie horde outside the city. This way, they could conserve a large amount of manpower, such as mystic cultivators and body cultivators. With the help of this kind of catapult, ordinary soldiers could also enter the battlefield to fight against the zombie army, as long as they hid behind the large catapults. More than 20 catapults were pushed up the city gate tower. However, these big guys were very cumbersome, and ordinary soldiers needed more than 10 people to push them up. This required a certain amount of time for mystic cultivators to attack from afar to fill in the gaps. Prince Mo and Duan Yu's group were currently standing on the edge of the city wall, coldly watching the zombie army that blotted out the sky and covered the earth below. There were probably several tens of thousands of them. Compared to the siege of Bailon City, there were only a few more. We still underestimated them. Duan Yu muttered to himself. Where exactly did these things pop out from? Wei Nanfeng couldn't help but mutter. If the lips were gone, the teeth would be cold. If the human territory really was captured by the zombies, then the entire Seacombe planet wouldn't be far from falling. After all, the Mo Kingdom capital was the largest defensive fortification in the north. If even the Mo Kingdom capital couldn't resist this wave of zombies, then the problem was already very serious. Other smaller places were even more unlikely to resist. Logically speaking, that shouldn't be possible. With so many undead puppets appearing out of nowhere, there has to be a place to contain them. It's impossible to appear out of thin air, right? Liang Qingqing said. There should be a large invisible underground village nearby. It should be under the Gale Forest. Mo Lien pursed her lips and said coldly. Bailey, she couldn't help but frown when he heard this. If even you guys can't immediately find out where the rat nests are, how are we going to clean up the rat nests hidden deep underground when we return? That's right. In this way, wouldn't the initiative be in their hands? And they can invade our country whenever they want. Wei Nanfeng couldn't help but say. At the side, Wei Nanshu's face had already turned pale. He hid behind Wei Nanfeng and shouted, third brother, what should we do now? We're surrounded by zombies. If he had known earlier, he wouldn't have come to Northern Mo to join in the fun. So scary. How could they resist so many zombies? Shut up. Wei Nanfeng coldly swept a glance at this good-for-nothing thing. This coward, his reputation as the third elder brother had been completely lost by this guy. Chapter 1508. Roar, roar. Waves of roars came from the distance. These terrifying sounds ripped apart the tranquility of the Mo Kingdom capital, causing all the commoners staying at home to become uneasy and tense. Currently, The streets outside were completely under martial law, and the commoners were all chased back home and prohibited from coming out. But this didn't mean that they didn't know what was happening. The fear of the unknown made people afraid, especially when the roars that came from time to time were neither human nor beast, causing people to feel even more terrified. Look, Xiaomi pointed at that batch of zombies below the city gate tower. Among these zombies that were bravely attacking the city, a portion of them seemed to be very intelligent as they followed those roars and walked towards the periphery of the city wall. They aren't thinking of circling around to the south gate, west gate, or east gate, right? Xiaomi asked in shock. Could it be that the zombies also had brains to think and knew how to change directions to attack the city? These things are starting to truly mature. Bailey, she said with a frown. Perhaps one day, they will evolve to the point where they are no different from us humans. Xiaomi instantly felt as if she had eaten a fly, feeling uncomfortable all over. It can't be. You all feel that these zombies can still think and have intelligence like us humans in the future? Everyone looked at her with a strange gaze. Does intelligence, Princess Me, this thing exist? Xiaomi glanced at them in astonishment before lightly poking Arbor's waist with her small hand. Jojo, just now they looked at me with a strange gaze. What did they mean? They said that you don't have intelligence. Arbor translated their gaze for her and then added, they feel that you might not be any smarter than zombies. Everyone. Me? Fuck. Xiaomi looked disdainfully at Bailey Shi, Wei Nanfeng and the others. How is sister not intelligent? How is sister not smarter than zombies? Cough. Wei Nanfeng hurriedly turned his head away, pretending to discuss countermeasures with Bailey Shi, Situ Yi, and the others. They directly blocked out Princess Xiaomi's noisy cries. You said that they aren't they very overboard? Xiaomi twisted her neck. She originally wanted to kick them, but Gong Sunlai blocked her with one hand. Princess, can we not court death? That's too much. Arbor nodded. When Xiaomi heard this, she immediately grinned and stepped forward to hold Arbor's arm. I knew you were the best. Your Highness, second young Master Do, and a group of people from the Celestial Medicine Valley have arrived. Mo Lian indifferently glanced at Hui Feng, who had come to report the situation, and indifferently nodded. Invite them up. At the crucial moment, the Do family's second young master, and those people from the Celestial Medicine Valley, could be considered reliable. Accompanying second young Master Do were eldest young Master Do Fingmian, Celestial Medicine Valley's Wenren Ningjing, Kong Rumio, and other physicians. As soon as they came up to the city gate tower, they hurriedly bowed to the crown prince before busily distributing mystic energy replenishing medicines to the mystic cultivators. They received a lot of favorability from the mystic cultivators. Arbor glanced at Wenren Ningjing and the others. They had fought together several times and could be considered old acquaintances. Your Highness, Dojo Master Ho Ping of Jixian Martial Arts Dojo, has brought a dozen mystic cultivators and more than 20 body cultivators to help. Your Highness, the people from the Duan clan have arrived. Your Highness, the people from the Talisman Patrician family have also arrived. Your Highness, the Wu family and the Hong family have brought people over. At this very moment, their wills were as strong as an impregnable fortress. Chapter 1509. Everyone was well aware that if the Mo Kingdom base fell, the entire Seacone planet would inevitably collapse along with it. In the face of the greater good, all disputes and struggles could be temporarily set aside. Right now, they were faced with a major problem that concerned the survival of all humans on Seacone planet. At this very moment, Mo Lian had mobilized all of the capital's reserve forces. Tens of thousands of mystic cultivators, tens of thousands of body cultivators, and hundreds of thousands of soldiers guarding the city, and were converging in batches from all directions. She had mobilized troops and dispatched generals in practically half a day. This kind of power was both shocking and apprehensive. The restless Eastern Ing Kingdom's third crown prince, Ing Fa, immediately shut his mouth. He didn't know how to describe his current feelings. He felt that when he returned, he would sternly warn his foolish and muddle-headed father. Don't ever try to come out of the small island. It wasn't without reason that Northern Moi had beaten them into an isolated island. Northern Moi was so powerful that even countries like Northern Wei and Southern Bailey had always been on good terms with it, and never dared to offend it, let alone their tiny place. It was pretty good for the Eastern Ning Kingdom to stay on the small island. At least their home country was still there. If they rashly came out of the island and wanted to counterattack the Mo Kingdom, then they might be swallowed whole within minutes without leaving a trace of their bones. Reorganize all the mystic cultivators. Go up the city gate tower in groups of 500 and rotate every hour. The rest of the people are to wait for orders and rest. Recover as soon as possible. Mo Lian gave her first order. Hui Feng immediately led his men down to do the job. Everyone pay attention. Don't let the zombie army below move to the east and west gates. Just guard this place. This kind of once-and-for-all solution was much more comfortable than running around the east and west gates. They only needed to keep a close eye on the north gate. Were the zombies trying to disperse their forces? That would depend on whether Prince Mo cooperated or not. Something's flying over from the sky. Archers, pay attention. Prepare to fire. Mo Lian reached out and swiped, forming the image of a fiery red bow and arrow in the air. Blazing fiery red flames tightly enveloped the bow. A shadowy arrow of fire was knocked on the large bow. Everyone only saw him squint his eyes and aim his bow and arrow at the sky. When a large group of cadaveric cranes and cadaveric crows flew over, the leader was actually a human-shaped cadaveric hag with wings that were more than a meter wide. This was a zombie that had completely evolved to the intermediate level. The wings on its back were no longer deformed and unable to fly. This zombie seemed to have evolved quite well. Swoosh! The arrow of fire flew through the air, heading straight for the wings of the flying corpse puppet. Everyone saw it clearly. The arrow pierced through the zombie's left wing and hit its right wing, skewering it like a piece of barbecued meat. Although the corpse puppet could not feel anything, with its wings skewered, it could not continue flying. Its entire body fell to the battlefield below, rolling on the ground. The arrow stuck in its wings made it unable to break free for a moment. Boom! It smashed into the sand, creating a 10-meter-long and several-meter-deep crater. Its fall caused the tens of thousands of corpse crows and corpse cranes behind the corpse puppet to lose their leader and fall into chaos. Fire! A sharp glint flashed in Commander Huey's eyes, and he suddenly waved his hand. The tens of thousands of soldiers on the city gate tower simultaneously released fire arrows into the sky. Boom, 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 boom. Tens of thousands of arrows glided through the air. Chapter 15:10. Things like corpse cranes, corpse crows, and the like continuously fell from the sky, landing on the ground with clangs of flames. The people on both sides of the city gate tower were mainly in charge of guarding and building a line of defense to prevent these zombies from having the chance to run past from the sides and take a detour around the east and west gates. Compared to their friends who were directly facing the zombie army at the main gate, the mystic cultivators on both sides were slightly more relaxed. In addition, the mystic cultivators who had been mobilized from various places were continuously replenished. After one group of people finished fighting, another group of people would immediately be replaced, and the previous group could rest for at least 4 hours. Fighting from dusk to dawn, the dismembered corpses of the zombies at the northern city gate of the Mo Kingdom capital's fortifications had practically piled up into a mountain. Arbor's eyes narrowed as she gazed at some sparkling things on the sand. Those were the crystal cores that dropped out of the zombies' heads after being killed. She could now confirm that these zombies with crystals in their heads were probably intermediate-level zombies. As for the winged zombie that Mo Lian had struck down from midair, she reckoned that it could already be considered a half-mature intermediate-level zombie. A intermediate-level zombie was probably level 2 or level 3. In her previous life, when she was about 18 years old, she saw these intermediate-level zombies with crystal cores in their heads. At that time, she still wasn't aware that these zombies that had part of the ability to think and could command in battle had actually already evolved to intermediate level. Because not long after, she was captured by Fan Xiohe to be experimented on. Strictly speaking, her previous life's memory and cognition stopped at about elementary level 5 zombies. She was currently still in the groping stage for intermediate level zombies. Moreover, even now, she still didn't know whether those sparkling crystals in the zombies' heads were useful to them or not. She only subconsciously collected these crystal cores based on her good moral character of experiencing poverty and hardship. Let's call them crystal cores for the time being. They looked similar to the crystal cores in Mystic Beast's heads. Of course, the crystal cores in the heads of intermediate-level zombies were clearly much smaller than Mystic Beast's crystal cores. Moreover, like Mystic Beasts, not all Mystic Beasts had crystal cores in their heads. The production rate of these crystal cores in the heads of zombies was also quite low. Therefore, all the more they couldn't be wasted. "Sister, what are you doing?" Xiaomi jumped in fright and subconsciously tugged at a certain child who was leaping down from the city. He seemed to be a little too impatient. He didn't expect that when his mind was thinking, "I have to pick up all these crystal cores," his body would start to move involuntarily. Arbor turned his head and blinked innocently at Xiaomi. I didn't do anything. I just wanted to lower my head and look at the scenery." Prince Mo, who was walking over quickly, couldn't help but twitch his mouth. Looking at the little fellow's guilty expression, he didn't even need to guess to know what she wanted to do. Walking to her side, Prince Mo reached out and held her restless body. He lowered his head and looked down at the city gate tower. "Don't be impatient. Once the battle is over, we'll clean up the battlefield. These will all be yours." Xiaomi, who was forcefully stuffed with dog food, was speechless. "May I ask Your Highness the Crown Prince, and Your Highness the Crown Princess, what the hell are you two talking about?" Why didn't she understand? Xiaomu coughed in all seriousness and waved her small paw. "I don't really want it either." Yes, that's right. It's your husband who must give it to you." Xiaomi, Are you two still not done yet? Chapter 15:11. How infuriating. Xiaomi glared at Northern Prince Mo disapprovingly. "Your Highness the Crown Prince, what did you come here for? Hurry and go back. I'll take care of sis here." For some reason, when she saw their honeyed state, her heart felt very, very stifled, as if her mouth was stuffed with dog fur. Even her breathing felt a bit heavy. Why couldn't her Bailey she learn from his good brother, Prince Mo? In terms of treating his girlfriend, the second prince of the Bailey family truly couldn't compare to Prince Mo. Mo Lian looked at Xiaomi strangely. What was the meaning of this woman's can't breathe expression? Right now, the situation on the battlefield was basically under control. He came to find his wife, but she didn't like him? Humph. Wife, your friend is a bit. Prince Mo pulled Arbor to the side and was about to say a few intimate words to his little wife. However, Huifeng swiftly floated in front of him. Your Highness! The Crown Prince glared fiercely at him. Tactless. Huifeng glanced at the Crown Princess standing to the side and hastily coughed. Your Highness, this subordinate has disturbed you. The death row prisoners are all outside. Should we let them out now? Mo Lian curled his lips. Those familiar with him could practically sense the bloodthirst in this smile. Wait a bit, let's waste another half an hour. After saying this, he looked up at Huifeng again. How are things over there? They're starting to make a move. The Crown Prince nodded in satisfaction. The day he had been waiting for finally arrived. On a day when the entire city was resisting zombies and all attention was focused on the northern city gate. The vassal king of Anan finally couldn't hold back anymore, right? Arbor glanced at the Crown Prince's pensive expression and curiously asked, Did something happen? Nothing. While holding her small hand, Crown Prince Mo slowly walked towards the tall tower erected on top of the city gate tower. He then carried her up the tower together. How's the view here? With tens of thousands of corpse puppets, we should be able to collect a few thousand crystal cores. Arbor nodded. I just don't know what it's for. Mo Lian lowered her head to look at her, and couldn't help but laugh. So you're only aiming for these crystal cores because you don't want to waste them? Okay. Bao Bao, you're such a thrifty daughter-in-law. Mo Lian shamelessly praised her. Arbor immediately nodded in agreement. I also think I'm very thrifty. Actually, I've tried. That crystal core can increase my medicinal efficacy. Arbor's eyes widened when she heard this. No wonder she couldn't feel the slightest energy fluctuation. That was because she wasn't a superhuman. Naturally, she couldn't feel the power within the crystal core. But Emolian was different. Did Emolian mean that the crystal in the zombie's head could increase the power of special ability users? What level has your medicinal efficacy increased to? She herself didn't have this kind of special ability, so she never knew how this ability was classified. I've probably crossed into the intermediate level. If the entire intermediate level medicinal efficacy is classified into 5 levels, I feel like I should be at the 3rd level right now. The devil grass that could paralyze my body before should already be ineffective if I get hit again. Arbor's eyes brightened. Then your resistance to poison is already very high. Chapter 15:12. One must know that the devil's grass was an extremely potent neurotoxin that could paralyze a person's nerves in a short period of time, which would then affect the limbs and body, causing them to stiffen. But now, even this neurotoxin could do nothing to Emolian. Arbor's little head rubbed against his chest. Then she suddenly reached out and gave him the small bag of crystal cores that she had collected earlier. All for you. No, you can keep them. If I need them, I will go and collect them myself. I have no use for them. I'll give them all to you. These below are all for you too. Arbor tilted her little head, then pushed the small bag into his arms. You're not allowed to refuse. Okay. Emolian laughed as he took the bag and put it into his inner world. He reached out and hugged her, then said softly, Jojo, do you want to see how strong my medicine is? Arbor nodded her little head repeatedly, her little face full of curiosity. Emolian smiled mysteriously at her, then suddenly looked up at the sky, at a corpse crane that was flying unsteadily. This corpse crane had separated itself from the group and was flying towards the east, looking like it was running for its life. It had some brains, but unfortunately, in front of Emolian, it had no ability to resist at all. Prince Emo raised his hand slightly, and a strong wave of spiritual energy sucked that unlucky corpse crane over. Ah! The corpse crane let out an unpleasant and hoarse cry. Before it could viciously pounce over, Emolian's eyes turned cold, and he directly reached out his hand. A strong medicinal fragrance spread out from his body, and his right palm was covered in a layer of white light. Very quickly, that corpse crane's body underwent a terrifying change. It turned from a half-rotten, half-bone-like corpse crane into a pile of rotten mincemeat, and this process did not take more than 5 seconds. Arbor watched as this corpse crane rapidly rotted under the effects of the medicine, until it turned into a pile of rotten minced meat, mixed with the dust, and scattered at their feet. She looked up at Emolian in shock. However, the man's cold expression faded. He lowered his head and winked at her. Smiling, he asked, Is your husband awesome? Arbor nodded vigorously. This was the first time he realized that special abilities could be so powerful. No wonder Fan Xioha, that pervert, captured 2 pharmacists later on and locked them up in a small dark room just like her, groping and studying their secrets. Jojo, your husband is so powerful. You don't have to worry, okay? Arbor looked at him and thought of the 17 floors of the Tower of Punishment. He nodded reluctantly, but still said, I'm worried. Emolian didn't know whether to laugh or cry as she rubbed her little head. Trust me, okay? I do. Arbor nodded. It's good that you believe me. I'll let you watch a wonderful show later, okay? Emolian lowered his head and smiled at her. I guarantee that you won't worry about me again after you watch it. A mere Tower of Punishment is nothing to me. Arbor looked at him curiously. What show? At this moment, the battle below had already reached its climax. The fireballs thrown down by the catapults had already ignited rows of flames outside the northern city gate. Fireproof ditches had long been built at the city gate, so there was naturally no need to worry about the fire burning the city walls. A portion of the dismembered zombie corpses that could be seen everywhere had already been burned into piles of ashes. Huifeng, you can release them now, Prince Emo said indifferently. Chapter 15:13. Release what? Everyone watched as the several dozen people, who had lost all color in their faces from crying, were herded toward the small side door at the northern city gate. Wei Nanfeng, Bailey Shi, and the others on the city gate tower were all stunned, and they hastily descended the city gate tower. Prince Emo held Arbor's small hand and floated to the side of the northern city gate's small side door, where he was met with a pair of wolf puppy-like eyes. He looked over and shot him a contemptuous look. ACI, this wolf puppy, was truly very persistent. Thankfully, his darling was a very strange little girl. ACI had been her enemy from the start, and she had never liked this person. Moreover, this hostile relationship was very difficult to change in the little girl's heart. Prince Emo, what are you doing? Pushing these fools out. Are you trying to feed the corpse puppet army? Yas laughed mockingly. Feed them? Assie's words startled everyone, and they abruptly turned to look at the group of crying men and women. Most of them were in the prime of their lives, and there were also a few women among them. However, the most eye-catching one among these people was a slender woman, wearing a thin red muslin dress. She should be a rather beautiful woman, but her hair was disheveled and her body was unbearably filthy, as though she had been viciously abused. Release these baits. Guifeng waved his hand, and soldiers immediately came forward to drag away the crying, screaming, begging, and even fainting men and women. Wei Mingli was among these people. When she discovered that her group was about to be thrown out of the city, her entire face turned pale with fright. She frantically struggled with her arms and screamed under the escort of 2 soldiers. You can't do this to me. You can't do this to me. I'm one of the second prince's people. Wei Mingli was about to be scared silly. She never knew that a person could be so unlucky when they were down on their luck. Ever since she failed to seduce His Highness the Crown Prince, she actually went downhill. First, she was mercilessly thrown into the death row prison by the second prince. No matter how she begged him, she was still mercilessly abandoned. It was only then that Wei Mingli realized that in the eyes of the second prince, no, in the eyes of those in power, she, Wei Mingli, was nothing more than a tiny ant. She didn't even have the chance to fight against fate and say no. Her life was worse than death. She was captured and sent to the death row prison. She was such a beautiful and powerless woman. It was obvious what would happen to her. She was repeatedly humiliated and abused in that dark prison, and her cries for help were ignored. Now that she finally had the chance to see the light of day again, she never imagined that these people wanted to use them, these death row prisoners, to feed the army of corpse puppets. Wei Mingli struggled madly and shouted harshly, "Why are you pushing us out as bait?" A whip landed on her body. The jailer who had escorted them out smiled mockingly at her. You're a group of prisoners on death row, who were originally going to be executed. Do you think you still have a way out? No, I'm not a prisoner on death row, I'm not. I'm Wei Mingli. Wei Mingli turned her head, and immediately saw Arbor, who was standing on the side with a slight frown. Without thinking, she pounced toward Arbor's side. Little sister Xiaoqiao. Save me, I'm Wei Mingli. Do you still remember me? It's me, Wei Mingli, Granny Nio's granddaughter. Wei Mingli. It's over. Chapter 15-14. Little sister Xiaoqiao. Save me. Before Wei Mingli could reach Arbor, 2 soldiers rushed over and forcefully pinned her arms behind her back, forcing her to kneel on the ground. How dare you offend the crown princess? Take her away. The soldiers held their knives to Wei Mingli's neck and pulled her with brute force. Don't pull me. You bunch of bastards, scram. Wei Mingli probably used every ounce of strength she had as she crazily pushed aside the 2 soldiers beside her and pounced at Arbor, toppling over. What are you doing? Arbor looked at this woman who abruptly rushed over in bafflement. He couldn't figure out why this person acted as if they were close friends and knew each other. How could this child still remember Wei Mingli? For a little girl who had faced blindness since young and had grown up slightly better, she could even forget ACI, let alone this Wei Mingli whom she had only met once. She completely couldn't remember, okay? She wasn't the crown prince who could instantly recognize any random Tom, Dick, or Harry that she had met before. Her little brain was only so big, and she still needed to remember more useful techniques. There was really no need to remember the faces of Tom, Dick, or Harry. There was no way she would admit that she was actually just a little face blind, that the little fellow stood there in all seriousness and silently glared at Wei Mingli. After the Crown Prince tugged at his little hand, Arbor also took a small step back. Take her away. Emolian coldly swept a glance at Wei Mingli. The latter shuddered and suddenly went on her knees, as if she had gone crazy. She kowtowed loudly and said, Your Highness, Your Highness! Please let me go. I was wrong. I know I was wrong. I really know. Wei Mingli wept like a pear blossom with tears, looking extremely miserable and pitiful. I shouldn't have obeyed the second prince's orders, and thought of ways to block your path and lure you in. It's my fault, my fault. Please be merciful and spare me this time. She was so regretful that her intestines turned green. His Highness is wise and mighty. How could he be so easily fooled? Second Prince Emolu had a hole in his head. He had thought of this lousy idea to trick the Crown Prince, but in the end, he had tricked her, Wei Mingli, instead. Now, the second prince was angry that she didn't keep the secret, and told the Crown Prince everything. He was so angry that he chased this traitor out of the second prince's residence, and even threw her into prison. But what could she do? She was only a weak girl. If it was anyone else, they would have been tied up in a dungeon by a group of vicious people and tortured to extort a confession. Other than confessing properly, they would have no other choice. Actually, Wei Mingli didn't know that second Prince Emolu was in a much more miserable state than she was. This fellow's scheme against the Crown Prince failed, and after being seen through by the Crown Prince, he embarked on a pitiful path of self-destruction. Now, the few remaining profitable businesses in his hands had all been exterminated by the Crown Prince. There was no way for him to survive. Rui Pavilion had already changed owners. Even if the second prince wanted to do something else, he probably wouldn't have the money to spare in the future. Wei Mingli also didn't know that second Prince Emolu hated that he couldn't tear her to shreds right now. The Crown Prince didn't have much of a reaction to Wei Mingli's sobbing. On the other hand, Arbor's small face completely scrunched up, and his gaze landed firmly on Wei Mingli's face. So you're that female scoundrel who blocked the Crown Prince's path? Arbor's gaze instantly chilled as he sized Wei Mingli up. Chapter 15-16. Also, what was with the kinship she was talking about? Seeing that Wei Mingli was lunging over, there was no need for Arbor to do anything. The Crown Prince directly sent a flying kick over, without the slightest bit of protective feelings for the fairer sex, and sent Wei Mingli tumbling over, landing head first on the ground with a thud. Arbor was perplexed and looked up at His Highness the Crown Prince. She's your relative? Everyone turned their heads away speechlessly. Prince Emo couldn't help but laugh. She seemed to be lunging at you just now. I don't know her. Arbor shook her head solemnly. Everyone was well aware of her temperament, and rolled their eyes one after another. Especially Xiaomi. She knew her younger sister too well. How could a child who couldn't even recognize young Master ACI recognize a passerby in front of her? Wasn't that a joke? You don't know me? You said you don't know me? Before Arbor could finish speaking, Wei Mingli turned to look at Arbor furiously. The Crown Prince's kick just now was a bit heavy, and she couldn't get up after lying on the ground for a long time. She could only turn her head to glare at him. I said I'm Granny Nyo's granddaughter. Granny Nyo is from the same village as your mother, Wei Ziqin. What kind of relative was this? There was no way they could even reach the end of it. Arbor's originally stoic little face instantly turned incomparably sinister. There's always some baffling people coming to me to claim kinship. The Qiao family was like this previously. The Mu family of China was like this later on. This way something in front of her was also like this. It was as if she was some cat or dog. It didn't matter if she was abandoned, but when she was happy and wanted to claim her back, she had to be deeply grateful? It was as if she had to happily acknowledge anyone who was her relative. Was that the case? Was she such a casual person? Have you asked for my opinion? Have you respected my wishes? Who do you think you are? Do I have to acknowledge you just because you say you want to claim kinship? The sudden cold anger, the icy tone, and the emotionless eyes instantly made the group of children, who wanted to laugh, all suppress their laughter in their hearts. The little guy seemed to be angry. Wei Nanfeng and the rest felt that it was better for them not to laugh, lest they add fuel to the fire, and be ridiculed by the little thing for no reason. However, her words didn't seem to be completely targeted at Wei Mingli. It was as if she was venting all the pent-up anger in her heart at Wei Mingli. Do I have to happily acknowledge someone who I wouldn't have contacted for hundreds of years when they suddenly pop up and claim to be mine? Do we still have to serve you? Do you think there's such an easy thing in this world? Arbor's cold gaze swept over Wei Mingli. Relatives? Heh. Arbor sneered. The Kayabin family who claim to be my relatives are probably all dead in the western wastelands. There are also some people who claim to be my relatives. Sooner or later, they will die in my hands. What about you? What do you think as my relative? What kind of fate awaits you? Those Tom, Dick and Harry relatives of mine don't seem to be people with long lives. There was absolute silence all around. There were so many people on the city gate tower fighting the zombies downstairs. But when their little crown princess released an extremely icy aura, everyone silently shut their mouths, and even started to lower their breathing. Throw her down. Chapter 15-17. A furious rebuke exploded in everyone's ears like a sudden clap of thunder. Everyone's hearts inexplicably trembled along with it. They didn't know, it was their misconception. They kept feeling that every time the little crown princess got angry, it was as if the earth quaked and the mountains swayed, scaring everyone so much that they didn't dare to move a muscle. Wei Mingli's pupils contracted, and she hastily shrieked. What are you doing? Let go of me. Let go. You can't treat me like this. Arbor, you slut. How can you face your mother by doing this? Wei Mingli only felt as if she had suddenly lost all gravity, as she was abruptly thrown down from the city gate tower, smashing into the battlefield. The last thing she saw was the little girl's icy gaze, which contained a trace of mockery, and was looking at her without any warmth. How could there be such a ruthless little girl in this world? She had already brought up Wei Ziqin, this great Buddha. Logically speaking, on account of her mother, she wouldn't touch her, Wei Mingli, no matter what. Why would she still throw her down? How could she know that the thorn in Arbor's heart called the Divine Province's Mu clan had truly pierced her too deeply? Upon hearing the word relative, she thought of the Divine Province's Mu clan's 7th Master Mu, and that repulsive Old Bai. Although Old Bai was already dead, the Divine Province's Mu clan absolutely wouldn't let her off. Therefore, she needed to construct a large-scale shielding talisman array above the Emo Kingdom capital. After this talisman array was constructed, it could effectively prevent people from the 6 prefectures and 3 provinces from using special passageways and spatial transportation talisman arrays to come to the Emo Kingdom capital for at least 5 years. There were only a few fixed locations in the capital that could allow people from the 6 prefectures and 3 provinces to transport over. She had already asked Emo Lien about this. This location wasn't random, and it was normally within the capital of several large countries. In addition, in order to avoid Heavenly Law's eyes, 99% of the cultivators from the upper realm, who used special passageways and spatial talisman arrays to transport over, were very low-key and wouldn't cause too much of a commotion. Thus, when the time came, she only needed to draw a few more talisman arrays and hand them over to Wei Nanfeng, Bailey Shi, and the others. At least, she could be at ease for 5 years. As for 5 years later, Arbor sneered in his heart. If 5 years were not enough for her to grow to the point where she could fight against the Mu family of the Divine Prefecture, then her growth was too slow. Previously, when he made a bet with 7th Master Mu and said 10 years, 7th Master Mu's eyes revealed a very incredulous look. She must have thought that it was impossible for her to catch up with the Mu family of the Divine Land within 10 years. However, the real number of years she had set for herself was 5 years. The Mu family of the Divine Prefecture, Humph, is nothing more than this. Compared to her, she had only one at the starting line, who said that she couldn't catch up to her later. If he wanted to completely control his own fate, he had to stand above all the other forces. At that time, it would be up to her whether she wanted to recognize this family or not. No one could force her, because forcing her would be useless. It would only deepen her reaction. I don't know if you're prepared to die. Arbor turned around and walked to the edge of the gate tower with a frosty expression. Wei Nanfeng and his group inexplicably trembled their small bodies. What a scary girl. It wasn't easy being her family's relative either. And at this moment, that group of death row prisoners had already been thrown outside the city, attracting the attention of a large group of zombies in the front row. Chapter 15:18. Now is the time. Emolian stroked Arbor's head and instructed her to stay here before walking towards the side door first. Open the side door. Team 1's body cultivators, follow me. Wuxia raised his arm and shouted as he quickly followed behind the crown prince. The leader of the Dragon Saliva Guard, Wuxia, led around 500 robust body cultivators out of the side door with the crown prince. This team was like a sharp knife that cut straight into the middle of the zombie army. Immediately, the corpse puppet army, which had a rather large lineup, was scattered in two directions. The mystic cultivators on the city gate tower quickly filled in the gaps and bombarded the zombies that were scattered to the sides with mystic energy. Everyone watched excitedly as the crown prince led his team forward and disposed of no less than 100 zombies in a matter of minutes. His Highness the Crown Prince's strength made people feel a bit puzzled. This man who appeared gentle on the surface was like an abyss. No matter how deep you dug, he always gave people the feeling that he was bottomless. Huifeng jumped down from the city gate tower and handed the latest news from the Hidden Night Pavilion to Prince Mo. Your Highness, the 12th Prince has already led Huifan and 2,000 royal guardsmen to intercept them. A cold smile surfaced on Emolian's lips. Suddenly, he creased his brows and looked up at the indistinct purple-crimson lightning bolts on the horizon. Heavenly Law, what's the hurry for? That's right, now is the time. The Emolian seal that he had suppressed for so many years was finally going to be released. An hour ago, Commandery Princess Ian had suddenly been taken out of the vassal prince's court and locked up in the woodshed. This made Commandery Princess Ian, who had been feeling very vexed these past few days, feel a deep sense of despair. She threw herself at the woodshed's door hysterically and pounded on it with all her might. She could only hear Sewer's intermittent cries outside the door in annoyance, but it was completely useless. At the same time, the vassal prince of Annan's court was filled with rows of men with red kerchiefs on their heads. The great king is licentious and tyrannical. The crown prince dotes on his treacherous consort. Now he has caused the people of northern Mo to be destitute and zombies to run rampant everywhere. It's time for us to retaliate. The vassal prince of Annan Chofu commanded. Red Scarf Guards, my brave warriors. Are you afraid of death? I'm not afraid. I'm not afraid. I'm not afraid. All right. The vassal prince of Annan, Chofu, shouted angrily. Then let's pick up our weapons for Bei Moi. For our poor people. Kill. 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 The 2,000 Red Scarf Guards were slowly nurtured by him over many years. As the saying goes, soldiers are trained for 1,000 days to be used in a single moment. Since the great king was unrighteous and gave him a withered woman to be his wife, he had no choice but to accept it. Then, he naturally didn't need to talk to them about benevolence, righteousness, propriety, wisdom, and trust. Of course, the current Chofu completely did not remember that he had previously wholeheartedly wanted to marry Commandery Princess Ian. He could only think of the humiliation he had suffered from that woman when he had consummated his marriage with her. No, it was the crown prince who humiliated her. Because that damned woman actually called him crown prince when she was making love with him. It really dealt a blow to his self-confidence as a man. He also occasionally recalled the unfair treatment he had received on the day of his wedding, as well as how the entire vassal prince of Annan's estate had become the laughingstock of the entire Mo kingdom capital. It was all this muddle-headed great king's fault. Since that was the case, then don't blame him for being heartless and unrighteous. Chapter 1519. At this time, the northern city gate welcomed a spectacular black fire burning down the city. Everyone standing on the city gate tower had already stopped what they were doing and collectively stared dumbfoundedly at that tall man with a frivolous back below the city gate tower. This too. Wasn't this too powerful? In that split second just now, Crown Prince Emo had soared into the air, and layer after layer of black fog had floated around him. After Wei Nanfeng and the rest took a closer look, they realized that it wasn't black fog at all. It was clearly ink-colored lotus flowers revolving around him. These clusters of ink-colored lotus flowers abruptly spread out in all directions like the mark of death. Soon after, everyone heard a series of explosions that made them sick to their stomachs, coming from all directions. The black-bone sword in Duan Yu's hand nearly fell to the ground. Even his Jade Heaven's 9 Thunder didn't cause such destructive power. Alright? Look at what this Prince Emo did. Just like a primitive destructive maniac, he towered in the air and looked down at the horde of zombies. Clusters of black flames rose from his fingers and gathered to form the lotus seal of death, instantly attacking the zombie army below. In that instant, everyone only saw the black flames crisscrossing back and forth, dancing in the air. Anything that dared to come into contact with it didn't have a good ending. Their bones were instantly roasted until they broke apart like a pile of shattered bones. This indiscriminate group attack simply stupefied everyone. Terrifying. One person's strength could actually be this strong? Duan Yu blinked, and suddenly threw away his sword before charging down as well. Fuck. I also want to kill these zombies to vent my anger, because that person is too infuriating. Why is the difference so huge? Brother Duan Yu, don't be rash. Situi also hurriedly chased after him. After Emo Lian's lotus seal of death annihilated a large batch of zombies, more than half of the zombies on the battlefield had already been eliminated. After Duan Yu and Situi jumped down, they each released mystic energy and directly tore a small group of zombies into ashes. Upon seeing this, Arbor also hastily dashed down. While the others were fighting corpse puppets, she followed behind them and picked up essence crystals. Her small face was full of seriousness. MHM, these cores were all going to be given to hubby, so naturally, the more the better. After Situi chased away the zombies, he couldn't help but be amused when he turned to see the little fellow happily picking up cores. Little junior sister, what are you picking up? Why aren't you giving senior brother some? It's useless for you. Arbor threw the cores one by one into the brocade pouch, and very quickly collected more than half of the pouch full of cores. Situi pursed his lips and elbowed Duan Yu. Go ask little junior sister for a few. What's the use of the cores? Xian Beast crystal cores, at least they could be absorbed and used. Although Xian Beast crystal cores were filled with explosive energy, at least they were still somewhat useful. The crystals in these zombies' heads are useless. As he spoke, Duan Yu purposely flipped through the heads of the zombies under him and took out 2 or 3 crystals, about the size of a grain of rice, before running to give them to Arbor. Situi speechlessly rolled his eyes. This punk. Gagaga. The North City Gate's main gate was pulled up by the winch, and the entire North City Gate was gradually being opened. Hui Feng led a group of armored soldiers and rushed out into the battlefield to clean up the mess. Seeing that there weren't many zombies left, Emo Lian sent Arbor a look. Let's go. Chapter 1520. Northern Mo's Royal Palace. Under Kong Jian's signboard building, dressed in black armor, the vassal prince of Annan Chofu coldly gazed at the youth in front of him. The youth was dressed in a purple and blue cloak and wielded a sword. He crossed his horse and blocked Chofu's path, with a dense mass of people behind him. Everyone formed a circle and howled as they aimed their spears at the red scarf guards behind the vassal prince of Annan. Vassal prince of Annan, are you plotting a rebellion today? Aside from the frivolous look in Emo Shurer's eyes, there was a bit of graveness. Your 12th Highness, let me give you a word of advice. It's not too late to withdraw now. I really don't know where vassal prince gets his confidence from. Emo Yu sneered. The old vassal prince of Annan accompanied ancestor father to conquer the world. But you juniors want to completely ruin his reputation for loyalty. Unfilial descendants like you probably don't have any meaning in existing. Mou raised his sword and roared with an icy gaze. Everyone listen to my order. The vassal prince of Annan Chofu has brought troops into the palace with malicious intentions. He is now under the great king's orders to kill all those who rebel on the spot. Behind him, the tide-like soldiers charged towards the red scarf guards led by the vassal prince of Annan. The two sides collided with each other like tidal waves, abruptly crashing into each other. At the same time, the great king was pacing back and forth in his bedchamber. Seeing that he had already paced back and forth more than 30 times, the Empress Dowager couldn't resist roaring at her son. Sit down. Royal Mother, this son truly can't figure it out. Why would the vassal prince of Annan bring troops into the palace with the intention of rebelling without rhyme or reason? The Empress Dowager inwardly rolled her eyes, but she still maintained a straight face. There are many things you can't figure out. Sit down. The vassal prince of Annan's family had long been involved in all kinds of subtle actions. It was just that the great king was busy with this beauty every day and reciting poems and painting with his concubines in his spare time. So he didn't have the leisure to pay attention to them. The old great king of the Mo kingdom lifted the corner of his robe and sat in front of his mother with an embarrassed expression. At this time, in his bedchamber, other than the Empress Dowager and Empress Zhao, He Jiaoyi, noble Lady Ying, and a few other beauties that were more important to him had been summoned by him. The imperial concubines sat there staring at each other, their faces filled with panic. From the sound of it, it seemed like there was a commotion outside. Not long after, Gong Chang'an trotted in with his two chubby little legs panting. Great King, Empress Dowager. What's going on outside? The great king jumped up from the stool in a hurry. Chou Fu brought 2,000 red scarf guards and barged into Kong Jianmen, but was stopped by the 12th prince. What? The great king slapped the rack of treasures beside him and roared angrily. This disloyal, unfilial disciple dares to risk universal condemnation and come here to force the abdication. Sit down. The Empress Dowager exasperatedly berated him. This was the consequence of not properly educating him from a young age and worrying about him when he was old. At this time, the Empress Dowager was filled with regret as she fiercely glared at the great king. The great king sat back down on the stool with a stifled heart and used his gaze to signal Gong Chang and to quickly continue speaking. Gong Chang was a shrewd person. As soon as he received the great king's gaze, he immediately understood and continued. Her Majesty the Empress Dowager, the great king. No need to worry too much. Chapter 1521. The 12th prince led 2,000 royal guards to block them outside Kong Jian's gate. Chou Fu won't be able to rush in for a while, Gong Chang'an hastily explained. They're already at Kong Jian's gate. The great king grumbled. This Chou Fu, isn't he worried about bringing disaster to his family by doing such a thing? Where is the vassal king of Annan? Does the vassal king of Annan know that his son committed a grave mistake? When the Empress Dowager heard this, she wished for nothing more than to immediately go up and give her son 2 heavy kowtows without any regard for her image. Was there even a need to ask? Anyone would know that the vassal king of Annan must be in the know if he still hadn't shown up after such a major incident happened. All right. She and the late king had a heroic reputation in vain. How did she give birth to such a pig-headed, pig-brained son? That truly a pig-headed teammate. If this guy wasn't her only son, perhaps she would have long crippled him. How could he be so stupid? Seeing that his mother was glaring at him with a hateful look, as if she expected better from him, the king immediately shriveled up. The great king subconsciously shifted his stool back and coughed lightly. Royal Mother, for safety's sake, let's stay here and wait for the crown prince for the time being. The Empress Dowager grunted in agreement and placed her hands on her knees, not saying anything else. Rather, it was He Jiaoyi who said somewhat anxiously, Great King, when this concubine came out, little 15th was feeling unwell and was still in the bedchamber. Could something have happened? The great king couldn't help but be startled. He then looked at the little boy in He Jiaoyi's hand. Royal father, Royal father. Mo Shirlu sprinted toward the great king's leg and called out with a yearning expression, "Royal father, royal father." The great king lovingly picked up his youngest son. At the side, Hijawi also looked at her son with a smile, her eyes brimming with motherly radiance. "Don't worry. Chofu was stopped by little 12th and can't enter the royal court's inner court at all." The moment the great king finished speaking, a burst of rampant laughter came from the door. Emole was startled and hurriedly turned his head to look at the door. "Vassal king of Anan!" The great king of Emo stared in shock at this man, who had suddenly appeared at the entrance of his bedchamber. There was some uncertainty in his eyes. Why are you here?" The vassal king of Anan gazed coldly at the great king, and suddenly raised his hand. The great king subconsciously hugged his son, Emo Sergio, and took a step back. Hijawi, Empress Zhao, noble Lady Ying, and the other royal concubines also turned to look at the vassal king of Anan at the entrance. The old prince was dressed in black armor, and had a long saber at his side. He looked just as mighty as he used to be. Just as he was about to step through the door, over 1,000 red scarf guards holding long sabers suddenly rushed in behind him. "I've waited for so long, planned for so long, and finally this day has come." The vassal king of Anan sneered at the people in the hall. "Great king, do you still think that His Highness the Crown Prince will rush back to save you?" The great king quickly nodded. "Don't do anything rash. My prince will be back soon." Haha. The old prince sneered at him. "Stop dreaming. Do you know how many zombies are congested at the northern city gate? You fatuous ruler. You also have a day like this. You. The great king of Emo was furious. He pointed at the vassal king of Anan and finally roared after holding it in for a long time. "Impudent." Swish. The sabers in the red scarf guards' hands were uniformly pointed in the great king's direction. Chapter 1522. This scene alarmed Empress Zhao, and she subconsciously rushed forward. She abruptly grabbed the great king's wrist and dragged him back a few steps. "Vassal king of Anan, you truly have guts. Where are the guards outside?" The great king also bellowed. "Guards? You're talking about those good-for-nothings?" The vassal king of Anan narrowed his eyes in disdain. "Your Highness the Crown Prince still thinks that by placing the 12th prince outside Kongjian's gate, he can withstand my vassal king of Anan's estate's elite troops, the Red Scarf Guards? Ha ha ha. Truly naive." At this time, the Empress Dowager spoke with an unperturbed expression. She didn't shout herself hoarse like the great king, and only said very calmly, "All these years, the vassal king of Anan's estate secretly nurtured 5,000 Red Scarf Guards? Ha ha ha." The vassal king of Anan laughed arrogantly. "How about it? The Empress Dowager also didn't expect it, right? That's not the case." The Empress Dowager shook her head and still said calmly, "We already knew that your vassal king of Anan's estate is constantly making big and small moves. There must be a conspiracy. According to your daily expenses, we can more or less speculate that you might be secretly raising private troops," the Empress Dowager said indifferently. Such a simple logic isn't hard to understand. The vassal king of Anan's expression instantly darkened. He felt that he had lost all his face after hearing the Empress Dowager's words. "Empress Dowager, why argue with this humble subject again?" He didn't come today to reminisce about old times with this Empress Dowager and the great king. The vassal king of Anan unsheathed the sword at his waist and walked step by step towards the terrified great king and the royal concubines. The Empress Dowager suddenly flung open her sleeve, and a long and continuous mystic energy wrapped over, instantly erecting a defensive barrier in front of everyone. The vassal king of Anan involuntarily sneered and clapped his hands twice. Two men in their early 50s, one tall and one short, walked out from behind him. They looked like mystic realm experts. "Empress Dowager, don't blame this humble subject for being vicious and merciless. It's just that you're a hindrance here. If he didn't get rid of this eyesore Empress Dowager, how could he free himself to deal with that incapable ruler?" The vassal king of Anan had long arranged for two mystic realm experts, whose cultivations were on par with the Empress Dowager's, to fight to the death. He had just captured the muddle-headed great king. As long as they had the great king in their hands, what was there to be afraid of? At that time, the Empress Dowager would naturally be captured. Immediately after that, it was that hateful northern Prince Mo's turn, as well as the culprit who had killed her daughter, Ian the Crown Princess. These people should not have a good ending. However, the vassal king of Annan's idea was pretty good. However, Prince Mo and Arbor had both arrived. Upon hearing the vassal king of Annan's disrespectful words to the Queen Dowager, as soon as he entered, Arbor raised his brows and turned to look at Emolien, seemingly puzzled. He was in a hurry to return to the palace, because such a big show was being staged in the palace today. As expected, the vassal king of Annan, this sly old fox, was good at scheming. He wanted to take down the Empress Dowager and the great king in one fell swoop, while the crown prince was leading his troops to resist the zombie army. This way, he could indeed coerce the Son of Heaven to order his vassals. Unfortunately, even though this plan was well thought out, it still had to be destroyed when he encountered the crown prince. At this time, the vassal king of Annan's gaze was slightly dazed, and he turned his neck stiffly to look at the smiling His Highness the Crown Prince. He kept feeling that when His Highness the Crown Prince smiled at him, there seemed to be a glint and shadow of a sword flashing past the depths of his eyes. Chapter 1523. A gloomy and eerie feeling. Terrifying. The depths of this man's eyes were ridiculously sharp. As an elderly prince who had been on the throne for a long time, he could be considered His Highness the Crown Prince's senior, yet he didn't dare to look him in the eye. The little stoic didn't have any other expression. The two of them rushed back from the city's north gate. When they passed by Kong Jianmen, they also saw Little Twelfth and the vassal prince, who were engaged in a lively fight. The unscrupulous couple only took a few more glances at Twelfth before they flew away with a wave of his hand in delight. The little stoic looked back. She probably wouldn't be able to forget Little Twelfth's expression, even in a year. It was a bit similar to the expression of a small animal abandoned by its owner. His pair of watery eyes were about to shed tears on the spot. Arbor shook his small head. You must be very protective of your younger brother normally. Look at what you've taught him. Weakling. Wasn't it just fighting with 2,000 red scarf guards? And he actually cried from being beaten up. He really was too weak, alright. Emolien. That what could he say? That punk, Mou clearly didn't cry from being beaten up by the red scarf guards. Rather, it seemed like he cried from being angered by his unscrupulous brother and sister-in-law. However, Prince Mo didn't say anything. Since everything his wife said was correct, he nodded and affirmed his wife's opinion. Younger brother is seriously too weak, don't worry. I'll take this opportunity to have royal father order younger brother to go to the military camp to train for a year and a half. That place can temper a person's character. In the future, younger brother will definitely become someone who can shoulder great responsibilities. Little Prince Mou, who was still fighting with the red scarf guards, suddenly coughed and rubbed his nose with a strange expression. Confusion. Who was it? Who was talking about him behind his back? Arbor glanced at Prince Mo and nodded. Very good. Speaking of which, our family's Xiao son has also grown up. How about we have him and Mou become partners? They can go to the military camp together to spend some time? It'll save them from being muddle-headed in the future. Sonner, brother-in-law can't help you. If your older sister wants to trick you, brother-in-law can only comply with your older sister's wishes. A certain son, who was studying in the school, suddenly felt cold. He shrunk his shoulders and heaved a sigh of relief. It must be an illusion. Seeing the young couple exchanging flirtatious glances with each other, the vassal king of Annan was infuriated and was just about to raise his hand. She then heard Prince Mo's apathetic voice say, Vassal king of Annan, do you admit to absorbing private troops, transferring treasuries, and even dispatching private troops to secretly plunder some villages? Does it matter whether I recognize it or not? The vassal king of Annan sneered. It's not a big deal. Emolien nodded. Looking at his slightly raised hand, she mocked with a sneer. Vassal king of Annan, from the moment this crown prince stepped through this door, it means that you've already lost. Do you understand? Mo Kingdom's old great king, who was enveloped by the defensive barrier, immediately cried out in surprise and delight. My king, hurry, Hurry and apprehend this heartless and unscrupulous thing. To think that we treated him so well, and have always respected him as a blood brother. In the end, he actually dared to take advantage of the zombies attacking the city to force us to abdicate. This is simply preposterous. Great King, sit down. Seeing her son jumping up and down, the Great King's awe-inspiring demeanor was practically gone. The old Queen Dowager glared fiercely at him in dissatisfaction. The Great King sat down listlessly. The vassal king of Anan sneered. Your Highness the Crown Prince is too overconfident. Chapter 1524. Overconfident? Was that so? Emolian glanced at the old prince with a smile. However, the smile in this glance was mild, and didn't reach the depths of his eyes. The little stoic pattered forward to the Queen Dowager. Grandmother. The Queen Dowager hastily removed the defensive barrier, and pulled her granddaughter-in-law inside. Jojo, how's the situation outside? What about the zombie army? It's more or less taken care of. Arbor comforted. Don't worry, those aren't problems. The Great King couldn't help but sigh in relief when he heard this. At least those repulsive zombies didn't charge into the royal palace to wreak havoc. Otherwise, the consequences would be unthinkable. The old vassal king of Anan abruptly raised his hand with a cold expression. The two Mystic Realm experts who were on par with the Queen Dowager shot forward with a whoosh and grabbed without hesitation at the old vassal king of Anan. The two Mystic Realm experts instantly pressed down on the old prince's arms and firmly gripped the back of his neck as they kicked him to the ground. He knelt on the ground with a stupefied expression and stared straight at the little crown princess, who was indifferently watching him. He bellowed in disbelief. Cho Hu Cho Bao, you actually dare to betray your master? The two Mystic Realm experts disdainfully swept him a glance and smiled faintly. Old prince, the two of us were originally His Highness the Crown Prince's men. It's you who was too blind. We've been hiding by your side for as long as 10 years. But you actually didn't know, TSK. Anyone would be angered to death by these words, alright? Not to mention the proud and arrogant old prince. He simply couldn't believe his ears. 10 years. 10 years. That in other words, the scheming little crown prince had dispatched these two to his side when he was 10 years old? The old prince was about to explode from anger. You. The old prince turned around and saw a group of black-armored royal guardsmen emerging from the roofs in all directions under Huifan's lead. Sharp leech-like arrows whizzed toward the 3,000 red scarf guards without explanation. The old prince's lungs were about to explode from anger. How could this be? How could this be? Actually, he and the vassal prince of Anan Chofu had come in two separate directions. The red scarf guards in his hands were 1,000 more than the 2,000 red scarf guards in Chiofu's hands. However, these 3,000 red scarf guards were completely surrounded and had no room to fight back. After the first volley of arrows, the second volley of dragon saliva guards emerged from the rooftops, all holding firearms in their hands. The second round of attack was even more inhumane. The old lord could only stare at the rows of soldiers outside the door, who had been killed by firearms with his scarlet eyes. These red scarf guards began to panic under the 2 rounds of extermination. They became more and more like a group of ants on a hot pan. They wanted to flee in all directions, but they were caught like turtles in a jar. The Great King couldn't help but feel shocked. The large square outside the king's palace had already been bathed in blood. None of the 3,000 red scarf guards were spared. He watched as the private soldiers he had single-handedly nurtured were mercilessly slaughtered by the royal guardsmen and dragon saliva guards. The old prince spat out a mouthful of blood on the spot. He pointed a trembling finger at the crown prince and stammered. You demon! You actually dared to make 3,000 soldiers bleed on the spot, without even blinking your eyes. What do these human lives count for in your eyes? Chapter 1525. Emolian suddenly laughed and gazed at the old prince with an apathetic and icy gaze. Vassal king of Anan, it's not like this is your first day knowing this crown prince. Is this your first time experiencing this crown prince's methods? You privately amass 5,000 soldiers. In order to feed these private soldiers, you secretly dispatched people to plunder villages and killed more than 1,000 innocent people. You still have the face to talk about human lives with this crown prince? This crown prince thought you already knew the words life is worthless. The old prince plopped down on the ground and stared blankly at Prince Emo. Suddenly, he burst into maniacal laughter. You think you've won? Men, bring everyone from the vassal king of Annan's estate here. With the crown prince's command, earth-shattering cries immediately traveled over. More than 200 people from the vassal king of Annan's estate, masters, concubines, young misses, young masters, servants and servants, were all pulled to the blood-soaked plaza. The great king, the queen dowager, the queen, and all the royal concubines followed Prince Emo out. They stood on the steps and looked at the group of people from the vassal king of Annan's estate kneeling before them. Emolien, you dare! The vassal king of Annan glared at the crown prince with wide eyes and tightly clenched fists. Kill! Emolien coldly threw down a word. Immediately, Dragon Saliva Guard stepped forward and pulled out the old vassal king of Annan's concubine sons and daughters from the crowd, before ruthlessly tossing them to the ground. Ah! Cries and screams came from the mouths of those concubine sons and daughters. None of them had their usual spoiled, willful, and lofty attitudes. At this moment, they had all become fish on the chopping board waiting to be slaughtered, struggling and thrashing. The Dragon Saliva Guard slashed a few times, and several heads flew up, dyeing the old vassal king of Annan's eyes red. Emolien! The old vassal king of Annan bellowed. Schemer! This crown prince thought you were already prepared to have your entire clan exterminated. What are you crying and yelling for? Don't throw away your old vassal king of Annan's pride. Emolien coldly interrupted him. The crown prince gazed icily at the old vassal king of Annan as he sneered. The winner takes all, so you don't have to be unconvinced. If today I, Emolien, was the one who lost, how many people do you think you will let go of? When he said this, the old king swallowed the words that were originally at the tip of his tongue. Right. If it wasn't for his son's foresight and early preparations, his group would have long fallen into the hands of the old vassal king of Annan. The consequence of being held hostage would definitely be to blackmail the crown prince. At that time, it would really be hard to say what the outcome would be. Jiaoyi He, who originally felt a little sorry, tightly held her son in her arms. The crown prince was right. If they had fallen into the enemy's hands today, how could they have spared her son? They would not let Emo 16th off just because he was 3 years old. They would only kill him. If the rebellion succeeded, none of the old great king's sons and daughters would survive. Jiaoyi He's gaze instantly turned icy. She sneered and said, Scheming to rebel is a path of no return in the first place. Vassal king of Annan, are you still unwilling to surrender without a fight? Ha 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 ha. The old vassal king of Annan laughed arrogantly and suddenly stumbled up from the ground. Good. He suddenly turned to look at the old great king of Emo Kingdom. I didn't lose to you today but to your son. Let's make up for yesterday's 2 chapters. Chapter 1526. This Prince Emo was truly formidable. Back then, when he was only 10 years old, he already knew to send people to infiltrate the old prince's side. It could be imagined that the crown prince had already set a trap for the old prince at that time. He was waiting for others to walk into the trap step by step. The old vassal king of Annan instantly felt that the situation was already hopeless before he even made a move. Wasn't it a little too frightening to fight with such an opponent? It was just like when you took your first step and suddenly turned around to discover that your opponent was already 100 steps ahead of you and had long reached the end. He was just standing there leisurely watching you, waiting for you to foolishly walk into the abyss. The great King Emo gazed at the old vassal king of Annan. He wanted to ask him why he was plotting rebellion, but in the end, he sighed and waved his hand. Imprison him first, then send the vassal king of Annan off with dignity. The Empress Dowager glanced at her son. Compared to this resolute grandson of hers, her son was much more soft-hearted. Although the vassal king of Annan's ancestors had rendered meritorious service to the country, The Empress Dowager couldn't tolerate him scheming against the Imo clan's power no matter what. For such a grave crime, there was no other choice but death. Perhaps the old vassal king of Anan had already thought of such an outcome before taking this step. Your Highness! The Dragon's Saliva Guard Captain Wuxia hurriedly walked over and saluted. The great king's son led troops in from the back of Huashan Gate. He originally wanted to coordinate with the vassal prince of Anan from the inside, but he was forced to retreat by the 12th prince and fled to Grand Consort Shu's Chaoyang Palace. The great king's son charged into Chaoyang Palace and took control of over 100 people in Grand Consort's bedchamber. What? The great king Imo roared angrily. This unfilial son, he actually dared to interfere? This fool! Didn't he know that rashly leading troops into the palace had completely sealed off his last path of retreat? Royal father, I request to see royal father. Second Prince Imo Lu's impatient voice came from afar. Imo Lu! The old great king frowned and waved away the guards blocking Imo Lu. Let him come over. Royal father. The second prince was wearing a set of tattered armor, and behind him were more than a dozen soldiers who had fought a bloody battle and were covered in wounds. From the looks of it, His Highness seemed to have brought dozens of mansion soldiers and fought all the way here to save the emperor. His face was filled with unconcealable anxiety and panic. He hastily stepped forward and cupped his hands in greeting. Empress Dowager, Imperial Father, Imperial Mother, are you all right? When this child received the news that the vassal king of Anan had raised an army to rebel, this child hastily led men to escort you. But we were still a step too late. This child asks for royal father's forgiveness. The old great king nodded at him with relief. I'm fine. Your grandmother and the others are fine too. Imo Lu pretended to heave a sigh of relief, then hurriedly turned to the crown prince and cupped his hands, saying, Sixth brother has done meritorious service in protecting the emperor this time. If not for you, the consequences would simply be unimaginable. Imo Lien curled his lips at him as he remarked indifferently, It's actually all thanks to 12th brother this time. He managed to obstruct the vassal prince of Anan first. Ah, that's right. Imo Lu hurriedly smiled and nodded. Who knows what eldest brother wants to do after taking control of the Rising Sun Palace? Imo Lien's eyes were filled with coldness. Detain the vassal king of Anan and these people. We might as well move to the Rising Sun Palace. At the same time, the great king's son's estate. Shu Quan ordered her personal maidservant to close the door before turning around to fish out a medicine bottle from her sleeve. She steeled herself and poured medicine into her 3 children's mouthfuls before finally drinking a mouthful herself. Chapter 1527. By the time everyone rushed to Chaoyang Palace's entrance, they saw the great king leading several dozen startled shrimp soldiers and crab generals to kidnap Grand Consort Shu out of the palace. Grand Consort Shu's face was filled with terror, and tears streamed down her face when she saw the Empress Dowager and the others. Consort Cheng, Secondary Consort Wu, and Secondary Consort Zhang followed behind Grand Consort Shu. Each of them more or less had a trace of terror on their faces, especially Consort Cheng. When she saw the great king Imo, she hastily knelt down and pleaded in a tearful voice. Great king, Imo Jiao was instigated by someone to do such a foolish thing. Please spare his life, great king. The flock of orioles and swallows around Consort Cheng then started sobbing. The vassal king of Anan, who was forced to kneel at the side, couldn't help bursting into laughter when he heard this. Consort Cheng, you're still begging them at this time? Do you think it's useful to beg like this? Today, even if this old man is on the road to the Yellow Springs, Consort Cheng and the great king can't be left out. Ha 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 ha. The young crown princess blinked and supported the Empress Dowager to stand at the side. She merely watched the huge commotion and didn't utter a word or express any opinion. The vassal king of Anan's wishful thinking was pretty good. He wanted to take advantage of the time when the crown prince gathered all the soldiers and headed to the city's north gate to resist the zombie army. He wanted to take control of Imo Kingdom's royal palace and use it to blackmail the crown prince. Unfortunately, This old fellow didn't know that the crown prince had been guarding against him since he was 10 years old. Prince Emo didn't kill important ministers who had rendered meritorious service to the country. The people that Crown Prince Emo killed were only traitors who were despised by everyone and hated by everyone. This point was very clear. This was also the source of the vassal king of Annan's resentment. He didn't expect that after living for several decades, he still couldn't see through things as thoroughly as a young fellow. What was laughable was that he obediently walked into the hole that others had dug, and then buried himself. This kind of ending made the old king vomit blood. "Bring them all up," Prince Emo said coldly. Cries and shouts could be heard as 400 to 500 people were pushed forward and forced to kneel on the square. The old vassal king of Annan was startled. When he turned around to take a look, he shockingly discovered that apart from the 200+ people from the vassal king of Annan's estate, the people from the great king's son's estate had also all been escorted over. "Reporting to your highness, this subordinate has brought a group of people who escaped from the great king's residence 300 miles away from the outskirts of the city." The old vassal king of Annan couldn't help but smile wryly. Just like the great king's son, before he made his move, he had already sent his concubines' daughters and sons away from the vassal king of Annan's estate in order to preserve a bit of the bloodline of the vassal king of Annan's estate. But now, half of his pitiful children had been ordered to be killed by the crown prince. The rest of them were already trembling in fear and on the verge of fainting. "Why don't I see the great king's son consort?" the crown prince asked as he scanned everyone with a sharp gaze. The great king's son, who was currently holding consort Dowager Shu hostage, couldn't help but be startled when he heard this. And he hooted at Wuxia and the others. "Were you the ones who killed my wife and children? Where did you take my wife and children?" This subordinate and the others found the princess consort and the 3 young masters and young misses in the great king's son's estate. "Impossible," the great king's son immediately refuted. "I personally sent my wife and children onto the carriage, so how could I not know? How could they still be in the estate?" Wuxia couldn't be bothered to pay attention to the hooting great king's son and waved his hand to have people move the corpses of Shu Quan and her 3 children over. Chapter 1528. When Consort Chung saw that her 3 grandchildren's bodies had stiffened and their faces were deathly pale, she immediately fell to the ground and wailed bitterly, You killed my grandchildren. Ah! Great king, great king." Consort Chung scrambled to the great king's feet and tugged at the corner of his robe as she wailed miserably. "Great king, those are also your grandchildren. You're just going to watch them die for no reason and have no one to complain about the injustice you've suffered. And my daughter-in-law, such a good child, was disposed of by the crown prince's subordinates just like that. Ah, my heart is in so much pain." The great king couldn't bear it and turned to look at his son, looking like he wanted to say something but hesitated. This gaze didn't mean much to Emolien. The crown prince had known for 100 years that his father was easily swayed and unreliable, so this gaze couldn't sway him at all. However, it infuriated Arbor all of a sudden. "Shut up." Arbor abruptly interrupted Her Highness Consort Cheng's screams and looked at her coldly, saying, "Poor Shu Quan, who was intelligent all her life, was in the same company as you fools. Who exactly killed her? Doesn't Consort Chung know in her heart? Don't you feel ashamed to be this kind of pointlessly good person in front of the great king at this time? I don't usually see you dote on this daughter-in-law that much." The young crown princess suddenly took a few steps forward, and the guards who were originally standing beside Shu Quan subconsciously retreated upon seeing this. The young crown princess squatted down and rummaged through Shu Quan's sleeves. She took out a letter and threw it to Gong Chang'an, who was standing at the side. Read it. Read it out loud. Read it for everyone to hear." Gong Chang'an's hand that was holding the letter trembled just like that, startled by the young crown princess's imposing manner. There was complete silence. Only the smell of blood spread through the crowd's noses. Father, your daughter-in-law is small and powerless. I was unable to persuade the great king to rein in his horse at the edge of the cliff. I watched him step onto a path of no return, Your daughter-in-law's heart was filled with fear and unease. I know that I have committed a crime worthy of 10,000 deaths, and I don't dare to live in this world. Unfortunately, the 3 children are still so young, and I'm really worried about them. I have no choice but to. Everyone looked in shock at the great king's second consort Shu Quan lying beside the 3 children. According to what she said, could it be that the great king's second consort had committed suicide while hugging the children? No wonder he looked like he was poisoned. Impossible. Impossible. The great king's son, Mo Jiao, trembled all over and screamed in shock. This is impossible. I clearly saw the 4 of them get on the carriage. How could he return to the great king's mansion and write such a suicide letter? It's you. You did it. The great king's son pointed at the young crown princess, and then placed the saber across old consort Shu's neck. Don't come over. If you dare to come over, I'll let her blood splatter on the spot. Archers, get ready. The crown prince's cold words not only stupefied the great king's son, but even the great king and the queen also turned to look at him. Father, don't blame your son for being ruthless. This person must be captured at any cost. Prince Mo indifferently swept a glance at the old great king and slightly raised his hand. The archers lying in ambush on the eaves instantly drew their bows and waited to shoot. When the gazes of the people from the vassal king of Annan's estate and the eldest prince's estate landed on the archers moving in an orderly fashion on the eaves, their lips trembled, and they started crying in a panic. Chapter 1529. Great King, spare my life. Great King, spare my life. Great King, we weren't aware that the vassal king of Annan would actually lead troops to plot a rebellion. That's right, that's right. This servant is only a lowly watering servant in the great king's estate. This servant is innocent, woo-woo. For a moment, all sorts of cries and shouts intertwined, interrupting the great king's arrogant shouts. The great king's son was indeed stunned by the crown prince's actions. After staring blankly for a while, he angrily rebuked in a trembling voice. You actually don't even care about Consort Dowager Shu's safety? As he spoke, he pressed his saber tightly against Consort Dowager Shu's neck, as if he wanted to confirm whether Emolian truly didn't care about Consort Dowager Shu anymore. He even drew out a small, bright, bloody mark on Consort Dowager Shu's neck. However, Emolian's gaze didn't change in the slightest. He merely sneered at the great king's son and spoke resolutely and callously. Consort Dowager was able to contribute to the Mo kingdom by putting herself in danger and cooperating with this crown prince to subdue you, this traitor. So her death was a worthy one. In the future, there will naturally be a place for her in my northern Mo royal mausoleum. Of course, royal father can also confer her the title of virtuous, and virtuous Empress Dowager. Everyone. The Empress Dowager. As expected, this grandson of hers had a venomous mouth and a venomous person. He could actually speak so bluntly in front of Consort Dowager Shu. But by then, Consort Dowager Shu would already be dead. So what was the point of conferring a posthumous title? Cough. The Empress Dowager coughed lightly in a timely manner. Since Shu Quan has already committed suicide by ingesting poison, and the 3 children are indeed innocent then. At this time, Gong Chang and had also read the letter to the end. In the letter, Shu Quan said that she had no other requests and only wished to be buried in a quiet place outside the palace with the 3 children. The Empress Dowager sighed. According to the ancestral rules, people who committed suicide indeed couldn't enter the royal mausoleum. Then, he would fulfill Shu Quan's wish of becoming a mother. She was also a pitiful child. She was originally so sensible, but she didn't expect that the ending would be so miserable. The Empress Dowager shook her head and then nodded. Then do as the great king's consort wishes. Find a few reliable people to do this properly. Let that child rest in peace. Yes, Empress Dowager. Gong Chang and received the order. However, Prince Mo glanced at Shu Quan's direction with a slightly strange expression before thoughtfully withdrawing his gaze and conversing with Huifeng in a low voice. After dismissing Huifeng, the crown prince looked up at the great king's son, losing his last bit of patience. How long do you plan to keep up this act? Brother Wang, Don't you know that your acting skills are really clumsy? Old concubine Shu and the great king's son were stunned. Even Consort Chung and the others standing behind them were stunned. If you still don't surrender without a fight, this crown prince will give the order to execute you on the spot. Prince Emo raised his hand and made a pressing motion. Upon hearing this, the great king's son shuddered. Old concubine Shu sensed the great king's hand going limp and quickly pinched his waist. They were currently fighting for their lives. Yet this pig of a teammate was actually frightened by His Highness the Crown Prince, and immediately wanted to reveal her true colors. However, this small action already allowed the Crown Prince to confirm that the two of them were indeed on the same side. Seize them! Old concubine Shu colluded with the vassal king of Annan and the great king's son to plot against the great king. Her crime deserves 10,000 deaths. With the Crown Prince's command, the imperial guards swarmed toward them like a tide. Chapter 1530. Previously, because of Grand Concubine Shu, the soldiers were somewhat restrained. Now that they had captured Grand Concubine Shu as well, they naturally didn't need to care about their lives. Mo Jiao was personally subdued by Hui Feng and kicked to the ground. He raised his head and shouted at the Crown Prince, "Mo Lien, you greedy bastard, quickly let me go. I'm Royal Father's eldest son. You can't treat me like this. Who do you think you are? Mo Lien, everyone knows that you were merely adopted by the Queen. You're not Royal Father's biological son at all. I'm Royal Father's biological eldest son." "Shut up!" the great king roared furiously. He hated hearing such words the most. After so many years, he had watched the little crown prince grow from a cute ball-sized child to such an outstanding youth. This was his biological son. No one could part with this father-son kinship between them. All of these people, including those bastards from the Divine Province's elder courtyard, all of them wanted to snatch his son. They were simply shameless. Second Prince Emolu's eyes flashed. He immediately stepped forward with his sword and chopped at the great king's head. "Mo Jiao, you colluded with outsiders to force the emperor to abdicate and rebel, and now you dare to slander His Highness the Crown Prince. The facts are irrefutable. Do you still want to deny it? Today, let me clean up the household on Royal Father's behalf." Ding! A streak of mystic energy swiftly bounced off the second prince's sword, causing it to deviate. Thus, the sword that was originally aimed at the great king's head chopped down on his shoulder. The great king's son roared and tried to get up, but several soldiers held his arms down tightly. He couldn't move no matter how hard he struggled. "Second royal brother, you're quite impatient." Emolien's eyes were gloomy. She looked at the slightly embarrassed second prince and sneered. "In any case, brother great king is our eldest brother. Even if we want to punish him, grandmother, royal father, and royal mother are present. It's not up to us brothers to do it." The second prince immediately smiled awkwardly. He nodded respectfully and retreated a few steps. "The crown prince is right. It was I, royal brother, who overstepped." As he spoke, the 12th prince walked over in high spirits while escorting the vassal prince and the defeated soldiers in a purple and blue cloak with holes. When the old vassal king of Annan saw his son limping, he immediately wanted to pounce on him. He roared, "Fu-er! Father! Cho Chao's Cho Fu's son." He Chao's son's son staggered and in Cho kneeled. When the old vassal king of Annan saw his son like this, tears involuntarily streamed down his face. He felt like a hero who had fallen from grace and was bullied by a dog. Royal father to royal father and royal mother. "Grandmother, the 12th prince is back." The 12th prince immediately ran to his mother and grandmother to act cute, that the queen-tess to Cho is. He chows and Cho. The king. The queen dowager couldn't help but sigh softly when she recalled what the crown prince said when he came to the longevity palace. Even if she was reluctant, the child had grown up, and the little northern moi couldn't keep him. Fu-er, Princess Anam Wu Hongma was in tears. She was restrained by the soldiers and couldn't move to her son's side. She could only look on helplessly as her Cho was trampled on the ground. She couldn't suppress the hatred in her heart, and she glared at Prince Mo. You're tuning in to the Li Mei's Wuxia Whispers YouTube channel. We're so grateful for your support, and don't forget to subscribe to join us on this incredible journey through captivating stories. Your generosity through donations truly makes a world of difference, as it's the primary source of revenue that allows me to expand and enhance this channel for you. Thank you from the bottom of my heart for being a part of this adventure.